The world bound by divine destinies, a fallen maiden found herself surrounded by cold contempt. Collapsed upon the stone floor while cruel scoffers taunted her complete lack of divine grace or athleticism, she could only weep as humiliation washed over her. Overwhelmed by the bitter torment, she sobbed quietly into her hands, wishing for nothing more than to return home, completely unaware that a dark-haired prince was observing her sorrow from afar. Approaching her gentle sorrow, he stepped forward into a radiant cascade of light and reached out his hand toward her with profound warmth. Looking down with a gentle, reassuring smile, his soft gaze promised comfort amidst her isolation. Breathing heavily through her tears, she lifted her head in sheer bewilderment at the sudden kindness. Closing the remaining distance between them, he tenderly cradled her delicate hands in his own, enveloping both of them in a brilliant aura. Observing this astonishing display, the onlookers shielded their eyes in utter disbelief at the overwhelming light emanating from the pair. As the warm glow intensified, she suddenly recognized the true identity of the noble royal standing before her. The holy kingdom of Maya, the dream-interpreting saint, was revered above all, for only she possessed the divine power required to banish the deadly dream demon that threatened human souls. This sacred hereditary magic traditionally belonged to the eldest daughter of the Seirios Count family. The title and power had instead been passed down to the younger sister Laila. Calling a past memory, a shattering teacup shattered the silence as Laila staged a clumsy accident in the parlor. Feigning innocence with a coy smile, the younger sister claimed she was exhausted and had accidentally lost control of her holy power. Stepping in immediately, their mother admonished Adiya, ordering her to forgive her younger sister's minor mistakes without question. Their mother coldly accused her of harbor envy toward her sister's gifted abilities. Adiya could only whisper a feeble denial. Behind their mother's back, the younger sister secretly flaunted her sparkling holy magic, casting a gloating glare toward her disgraced elder sister. She stood quietly in memory as her sister berated her, pointing out how useless it was to resent anyone when the family line had not produced a truly great saint in a century, rendering her inability to lift even a simple curse an embarrassing failure. Standing alone in the vast room, the younger sister declared with cold arrogance that comparing their abilities was simply pathetic. Dismissing her elder sibling's presence, Laila brushed her hair aside and noted that Lord Shihab would soon arrive. Leaving her behind to clean up the room, her sister sharply reminded her that relying on others would do nothing to improve her situation before walking away. Memory shifted to the moment Lord Shihab entered, looking at her with disdain and questioning her attire, prompting her sister to feign sympathy while mocking her inappropriate dress and brooch. Looking at the quiet garden pavilion, she pondered when exactly everything in her life had broken down into such a miserable state. Recalled how Shihab al Merope, the eldest son of a distinguished marquis family destined to lead the Holy Knights, had been engaged to her when they were just 13, treating even his minor wounds with quiet care as he praised her dedication. Betrothal had been arranged by family mandate long before their birth, a union that once brought joy when he arrived to see her. But over time, the arrangement decayed into an empty formal tie that benefited only their houses, a bond that neither of them truly desired any longer. Laila demanded the family heirloom brooch given to her fiancé. She had quietly refused without her father's permission, only to be coldly brushed off. Deep corrupting darkness seized her eye as the painful realization took root that her sister was deemed far more suitable in every way. Left shivering in the dirt as her sister offered to handle Lord Shahab's curse, she was harshly ordered to go home and stop spreading her weakness. Tears welled in her eyes as intense hatred and desperation overwhelmed her, longing for the mysterious boy from her dreams to carry her away from this torment. Suddenly, 3 years prior, she found herself drifting in a strange, dark, watery realm surrounded by floating, glowing globes. She realized she was trapped within the realm of the nightmare demon, a terrifying dream world where negative emotions were amplified to corrupt human hearts with pure malice. She came upon the collapsed victims of the sleeping sickness, their motionless bodies lying cold upon the dark, desolate ground of the dream realm. Rushing to their side, she knelt beside the darkened form of the young man. Though her own condition was far from stable, she knew that without immediate intervention, his life, and the lives of the others, would soon be extinguished. Offering her own blood to channel her sacred gift, a blinding radiance erupted around them, engulfing their figures in a swirling vortex of holy magic. As the brilliant light ebbed, the young man slowly stirred and opened his eyes. Exhaling a soft breath of relief, she asked how he felt, relieved that her sacred power had successfully reached him. Youth stared up in wonder as her divine energy expanded further, purifying the malicious shadows of the nightmare demon that had ensnared their minds. Together they stood within a cleansing tide of shimmering particles as the oppressive dark realm began to dissolve into pure light. Looking up at her with a tender, heartfelt smile, the young prince expressed his profound gratitude for saving his life. Around them, the lingering embers of the nightmare softy faded into the quiet expanse. He marveled at the breathtaking spectacle. She sensed her consciousness slipping away, realizing she had to wake up immediately before her physical body perished. Before she could pull away, he gently caught her hand, holding her fast within the radiant glow of the fading realm. Intertwining their fingers, he spoke of a magic of reunion, promising with quiet certainty that once he awoke in the physical world, he would come searching for her. Shattering the dream, Adiya awoke back in her sunlit bedchamber. Looking down at her palm, she traced the faint scar left behind, irrefutable proof of that otherworldly encounter, even though her holy powers had remained completely sealed ever since. Sitting alone on the edge of her vast bed, she gazed out the grand window in quiet contemplation. Deep down, she yearned to meet that youth once more, wondering if he could offer an escape from her present torment. Yet a nagging fear told her he had likely forgotten all about their shared dream long ago. Meanwhile, in the adjacent dressing quarters, Laila gushed excitedly over an elaborate gown tailored for an upcoming banquet, while Adiya observed her sister's shallow delight in silent detachment. She stood in quiet shock as her mother berated her, questioning if she secretly desired a birthday celebration of her own, despite her younger sister's upcoming party. Mother scathingly condemned her greed, accusing her of wanting praise for herself rather than celebrating her hard-working younger sister who constantly compensated for her incompetence. Cruel words continued to rain down as her mother proclaimed her heart rotten, while Laila stepped in sweet-naturedly to reassure their mother, earning warm praise in return. Listening in disbelief, she stammered out a question when her mother admitted she had once tolerated her solely because of their shared bloodline. Heartbreaking blow landed with devastating finality as her mother declared that giving birth to her had been a mistake while embracing Laila warmly. Devastated, she retreated to the hallway while inside, her sister selected her party dress, accidentally dropping a sparkling ornament to the floor. Beneath Layla's innocent facade lurked a shadowy, sinister delight as she held the gleaming trinket. Mocking her sister's misfortune, Laila gloated that even the precious brooch had chosen her instead, leaving her discarded and pitied. At the grand birthday gathering, guests showered praise upon Laila for fulfilling her duties as a saint despite her youth, while quietly discussing her sister's miserable plight. Whispers rippled through the crowd celebrating the young saint, as onlookers noticed Lord Shihab standing closely beside Laila and questioned his absence from his actual fiancé's side. As the host announced a second celebratory piece of news alongside the birthday festivities, anxiety mounted among the murmuring noble guests. The shock of all present, the announcement revealed that Lord Shihab Merope and Laila were now officially engaged. The host justified the sudden shift by publicly explaining that Adiya had failed to manifest the saint's crest or use holy power, making her unfit for the alliance. Whispers of agreement echoed through the hall, acknowledging that a prestigious lineage demanded a capable bride rather than a powerless daughter. Stepping forward beside Laila, Lord Shihab proudly declared that he himself had requested to sever his engagement with Adiya in order to marry her sister instead. He stood over her, condemning the public humiliation while Adiya collapsed on her knees, trembling under the weight of his cruel words. Glaring down, he accused her of repeating her past failures, utterly indifferent to her quiet despair. Berated her further, listing all the family privileges and support she had squandered without manifesting a saintess crest like her sister. Claiming his harshness was for her own good, he questioned if she was even capable of accomplishing anything as she shrank away in shame. Cold voice echoed, mocking her complete abandonment by her own blood. Memories surfaced of her sister and family accusing her of being unfair and ruining Lord Shihab's standing simply by existing without power. She remembered the treasured family brooch shattering on the floor, symbolic of her broken life while others enjoyed happiness. In past recollections, Laila taunted her, questioning why she tried so hard when everyone mocked her lack of saintess abilities. Laila leaned in closely, whispering the damning title of useless saint directly into her ear. Sister mockingly asked if she was happy, mocking her for doing nothing while benefiting from the family's title. Adiya remembered seeing Shihab and Laila laughing together in the garden, completely excluded from their light-hearted world. Crying alone, she believed someone useless like her had no right to wish for love, holding on to the faint memory of a boy who once promised to meet again. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but a faint, desperate resolve glinted in her eyes. Clinging to the memory of the dark-haired boy from her past, she decided that becoming a true saintess was her only remaining hope. For 3 years prior, young Laila threw a bitter tantrum, stubbornly refusing to study or fulfill her duties to become a saint. Her older sister gently insisted that she needed to learn the holy teachings. Laila cast her books aside and bolted out of the room in defiance, deaf to her sister's calls. Sitting alone at the dining table, she squeezed her plush toy tightly, brooding over why she was never permitted to eat first. Meanwhile, Adiya underwent grueling training, surrounded by the luminous weight of her developing holy power. By decree of the Seirios noble lineage, the eldest daughter was expected to awaken as the saint at age 13 after rigorous discipline, leaving Laila to harbor deep resentment over being ignored. Yet, despite the established custom, Adiya's divine power had already begun to manifest early, at the tender age of 12. Watching from the shadows, jealousy festered within the younger sister's heart. Determined to break the unfair tradition, she resolved to steal that sacred power directly from her sister. As she held her doll, an eerie voice echoed from the toy, promising to grant her the power she so desperately desired. Perplexed, she questioned the entity, which instructed her that she need only reach out and seize the power with her hands. Sinister voice whispered that doing so would make her special, just as Adiya returned to check on her. Adiya apologized softly for the delay and invited her to eat, though she was secretly haunted by an unsettling nightmare from the previous night. Calling the omen from her dream, she requested to examine the stuffed animal Laila held. She realized with growing dread that a dream demon inhabited the object, confirming that her prophetic vision was coming true. Before she could react, Laila suddenly lunged forward with a sinister glare, taking her completely by surprise. She stared in shock as Laila declared with absolute conviction that the power belonged to her alone. Driven by dark impulses, Laila lunged forward and physically seized her, intent on stealing the saint's power. Sinister plan succeeded. Laila absorbed the miraculous energy, leaving Adiya's eyes void of light. Fusion washed over her as she suddenly felt her magic vanish, while Laila stubbornly hid the plush toy behind her back. Laila immediately burst into fake teasers, crying out for their mother to frame Adiya as a bully. Her mother instantly took Layla's side, scolding the innocent older sister who could only apologize in dismay. From that day on, Laila systematically stole her prophetic dreams, claiming them as her own while greeting her with a cruel smile. Because the power originated from Adiya, Laila kept her close to continuously drain her light, eventually taking her fiancé, Lord Shihab, as well. Years later at the Merope household, Shihab coldly mocked her decline, vowing never to release his grip on her ruined life. Father heartlessly cast her out following the broken engagement, leaving her in absolute despair. Nowhere else to go, she was forced to accept a humiliating role as Layla's personal maid. Resigned to her grim fate, she resolved to perform her maid duties diligently despite the surrounding pity and contempt. Shihab continued his psychological cruelty, accusing her of following him to the Duke's household out of lingering affection. Layla glared with intense hostility, venomously calling her shameless for standing near her man. Shihab comforted Layla intimately, blatantly accusing Adiya of trying to seduce him right in front of them. He inwardly questioned when she had ever used seductive looks, bewildered by the wild claims being made against her. Meanwhile, her sister happily announced that an invitation to a bride-seeking party had arrived from a desperate older sister looking for a match. Layla held the letter with a gleeful expression, marveling at the news regarding the third prince of the Alger Empire. Mention of his title struck a chord of recognition, bringing the image of the cursed prince instantly to her mind. The distant realm of the Alger Empire, the third prince possessed extraordinary magical power. However, he had been cursed by a fell monster and cast into a deep, unending sleep. Layla continued to speak with cruel excitement, reasoning that the bride-seeking gathering was merely a search for a sacrifice, and offering a noble daughter would guarantee peace for their kingdom. Stepping closer, Layla whispered the word with malicious intent, ensuring the weight of the dark proposal settled heavily upon her. He declared that if her fallen sister were sent in her place, their family's name would finally be cleansed of disgrace. Shihab observed quietly, weighing the political ramifications and reassuring himself that breaking off their engagement had ultimately forced this path. The mockingly sweet smile, Layla pointed out the prince's affliction, cruelly suggesting that two filthy broken individuals belonged together. Clenching her fist over her heart, she endured the cruel taunts in silence, clinging to what little dignity she had left. Refusing to be utterly demeaned, she offered to use her own divine strength to heal the sickness her sister spoke of so callously. She reached out, her sister dramatically feigned being attacked, prompting Shihab to angrily demand an apology while she screamed out in desperation that she was not filthy. Clinging meekly to her defender, the younger sister whispered false concerns to manipulate his sympathy further. Forced into submission, she murmured a soft apology while her sister played the victim, falsely lamenting how she was always portrayed as the villain before offering hypocritical help. Grabbing her chin with a chilling grin, the manipulative sister forced her to utter a humiliated plea for help. She could only watch in stunned silence as Laila deliberately threw herself backward with a theatrical cry, orchestrating a scene to force her into total submission while their noble companion turned in surprise. Standing beside her companion, Laila coldly commanded her down to the floor, demanding that she drop to her knees and beg for mercy. Laila looked down with smug arrogance, reminding her that a mere maid had no right to demand favors from the future duchess unless she pleaded properly. Turning to Shihab for validation, Laila sought his approval and he coolly concurred without a shred of sympathy. Left with no alternative, Adiya pressed her forehead against the cold floor, whispering a desperate plea for help. Knowing that she had nowhere else to turn, Adiya accepted her grim fate while Laila sweetly promised to prepare an attire suitable for a sacrificial bride. The social gathering, anxious murmurs filled the hall as guests whispered dark rumors about the third prince of the Alger Empire, branding him a bloodthirsty monster. The crowd showered praise on the stunning pair of Laila and Shihab. Harsh insults were hurled at Adiya, mocking her plain dress and calling her a talentless saint. Cruel voices echoed through the ballroom, callously wishing that she would be the one sent off as the ultimate sacrifice. Amid the overwhelming feeling of isolation, a sudden burst of excited gasps erupted through the crowd at the prince's arrival. Stepping into the hall, the third prince captivated everyone with his striking, handsome appearance, shattering all the terrifying rumors about his looks. When intimidating and icy aura warded off the onlookers, Adiya gazed at his silent figure, overcome by a strange sense of nostalgia. Official announcement echoed across the room, summoning all potential marriage candidates to step forward into line. Sudden stumble broke the order, catching the sharp, immediate attention of the dark-haired prince. The startled cry, Adiya tumbled heavily to the ground right before him, leaving the onlookers in shock. Having fallen to the floor, she looks up in shock as the prince steps forward, softly murmuring that he has finally found her. Kneels before her with a surprisingly gentle smile, leaving her completely stunned by his warm demeanor. Gazing into his affectionate eyes, she wonders why he looks upon her with such unexpected kindness. As their hands meet, a sudden bright burst of light erupts between them, shocking them both with its magical manifestation. Holding her hands tenderly amidst the sparkling light, he reveals that he has been searching for her all along. He suddenly realizes her past dream was real, recognizing him as the very savior who had promised to find her. Overcome with emotion, he pulls her into a delicate embrace, whispering how deeply he has longed. Standing upon the high stone balcony overlooking the distant realm, Prince Bael reflected on his journey. His attendant noted that the lingering headaches from the curse were slow to heal, yet the prince remained resolute, knowing he had finally reached this distant frontier. His mind's eye, the gentle face of the young woman from his visions, flickered like a warm memory, her soft smile driving him onward. He gazed out toward the holy kingdom of Maya, the last remaining religiously independent nation along the borderlands, where he believed his answers awaited. 3 years prior, he had awakened from a prolonged coma inside his royal chamber. His retainers, led by Zell, had gathered around his bedside in relief, revealing that he had been afflicted by a dream demon's curse. Upon waking, a sharp, sudden pang struck his chest, causing him to gasp as an unfamiliar magical pulse resonated within him. Clasping his hands together, he realized the truth. During his dream, he had cast a magical spell of reunion upon the woman he met. By its nature, the spell bound their fates, forcing them to share each other's physical suffering until they were reunited. Driven by this realization, he rushed from his room, ignoring Zell's desperate pleas to halt. Shortly after, he confronted his father, the Emperor. Bael insisted that the nightmare curse had lifted only because of the girl in his dream, demanding permission to find her. However, the Emperor refused to grant him leave, citing his royal position and duties, before instructing Zell to keep a close watch over the headstrong prince. Back in the present, Bael walked alone through the dense forest trail, pushing deeper into the wilderness. A sudden spike of pain shot through his forehead, forcing him to clutch his head in agony as the spell's feedback flared once more. Behind, Zell stepped forward and warned him against being so reckless, pointing out the immediate dangers surrounding them. Zell scolded the young prince for running off on his own again and urged him to take his medicine to soothe the lingering headaches. Bael, thoroughly irritated, retorted that if Zell wasn't going to assist with his training, he should simply stay quiet and watch. Adjusting his glasses, Zell questioned why the prince insisted on chasing an illusory girl from a dream when he could easily court a noble lady of proper status under the Emperor's approval. Without missing a beat, Bael unleashed a devastating torrent of magical energy into the clearing, obliterating the terrain before them in a blinding flash. The dust cleared, Zell stared in shock at the sheer destructive power displayed, while Bael coolly noted that his attendant had also let his guard down. He stood with his attendant, who observed the rapid surge of raw mana with utter astonishment, noting how difficult it should be to control such immense magical power in so short a time, especially as the magic of reunion reacted violently within him. Deep down, he sensed that something dire was happening to her, realizing it made no sense for someone capable of breaking a nightmare curse to be so undervalued. Determined to act without delay, he declared his immediate departure, ignoring his attendant's anxious pleas to hesitate. Dark aura swirled around him as he cast a chilling gaze back, warning his companion in no uncertain terms never to stand in his way. The elderly advisor stared in absolute terror, recognizing that the youth standing before him had become the most powerful magic wielder in the entire empire. Acknowledging his absolute dominance, the attendant bowed deeply in total submission, granting his lord's every demand. After slaying a formidable monster, the young prince knelt before his imperial father, who offered him a reward for his tremendous feat. Glancing up with cold confidence, he asked his father if his vast power had finally been proven beyond doubt. The emperor granted his request with a strict condition. If he could not find the girl from his dream before turning 18, he would be forced to marry a noblewoman of the emperor's choosing. 3 years passed in vain. Despite using the full weight of imperial authority and dispatching search parties across multiple lands, gaining entry into the closed borders had proven nearly impossible. Gazing out from the balcony, he pondered how the obstinate Holy Land of Maya had managed to resist the Empire's reach, operating entirely under his father's strategic designs. The lingering pain from his magical mark throbbed. His attendant announced that the time had arrived, while local nobles whispered about Prince Bael Ras Algul's presence. Radiating an intense, suffocating pressure, he resolved that he must find her immediately. Turning to leave with Zell, he harbored a dangerous truth. If it were not for her, he would have destroyed the entire country without hesitation. Passersby trembled in fear as he walked past, whispering rumors that the prince was a terrifying, diseased devil, while young women claimed they would rather die than become his bride. Dismissed the local attendants with cold indifference, refusing to waste another moment on trivial introductions. Surrounding aristocrats whispered in fear of the third prince, unaware of his urgency to rescue the girl from his dreams. As his arrival was announced, shallow noblewomen swarmed around him, hiding their terror behind superficial flattery. Pulsed by their greed, he searched the crowd in vain, frustrated that she was nowhere to be seen. Nearby, a young woman sat alone on the ground, weeping silently from harsh mistreatment. Cruel onlookers mocked her relentlessly, labeling her as nothing more than a useless burden. Noticing the commotion, his gaze shifted toward the cruel scene unfolding beneath the trees. Instantly recognized her delicate features and soft, radiant light hair. Approaching her gently, he asked about her well-being, confirming his long search was over. His heart surged with certainty, knowing she was the destiny promised to him. Pulled her into a warm embrace, expressing deep gratitude for the savior from his visions. Holding her close, he proudly proclaimed before everyone that she was his bride. He gasped in sheer disbelief while the surrounding onlookers froze in total shock. Sister stared in utter horror, realizing the forgotten girl had become the imperial prince's chosen one. Panic swept through the aristocrats as they realized losing her meant losing control over her holy power. She stood frozen in place as Prince Bael drew near, while her sister and the surrounding nobles looked on in complete bewilderment, whispering whether some grave misunderstanding had occurred. Laila immediately spewed venomous lies, claiming the young woman feigned helplessness solely to win the favor of men, leaving her trembling in shock at the cruel accusations. Continuing her malicious outburst, her sister sneered that no proper lady would stand beside royalty in such tattered attire, fiercely declaring that she would never hand her over. The arrogant noble stepped forward to demand her complete servitude, ordering her to return home in shame, prompting the young woman to bow her head in silent apology. Before anyone could lay a hand on her, the prince cut through the crowd with a sharp, lethal command to step back. Her sister recoiled in sheer shock, stunned by his immediate and firm intervention. Without warning, an overwhelming aura of magic erupted from his body, slamming into the surrounding nobles with crushing physical weight. Unable to withstand the raw power radiating from him, the onlookers collapsed onto the ground, gasping beneath the intense force. Holding her safely within his arm while his magical authority flared around them, he glared down at the fallen nobles and demanded to know if they were the ones who caused her pain. Nobles realized with horror that his magical mastery was otherworldly, exerting terrifying pressure upon everyone while leaving her completely untouched. Hysterical and desperate, Laila pointed a trembling finger, shrieking that a powerless failure abandoned by her fiancé could never be fit to stand as an imperial bride. The painful reminders of her lost status weighed heavily on her heart. The prince pulled her close and softly reassured her that everything was fine, raised her delicate hand to his lips, reverently announcing to all present that she was the savior who had rescued him from the deadly sleeping sickness. Gazing intently into her eyes while holding out the sacred mark on her hand as indisputable proof, he left the arrogant aristocrats speechless and undone. Kneeling before her beneath the sunlit trees, the prince publicly pledged his devotion, declaring to the entire world that she was a truly wonderful person. He stood frozen in panic, realizing with growing dread that Anya was about to be taken away forever if he failed to speak up immediately. Before he could utter a word, a firm hand landed on his shoulder, keeping him pinned in place while an official sternly admonished the Holy Kingdom's arrogance. Sharp-eyed, glasses-wearing officer warned him that interference with Prince Bael would draw no mercy, leaving the young man grinding his teeth in helpless frustration. Meanwhile, Anya looked on in utter disbelief, wondering if the prince could truly be serious about his grand declaration. She reflected on her painful past, recalling how she had always been dismissed as a powerless, useless saint by everyone around her. Bael admitted that while he did not know all the details of her suffering, he was certain of his feelings and intentions toward her. Gently reminded her of the miraculous moment she had saved his life, holding her tenderly amidst the swirls of ethereal light. Looking into her tear-filled eyes, he promised that this time he would be the one to protect her, before softly asking for her true name. Tears of relief spilled down her cheeks as she proudly introduced herself as Adiya Seirios, the eldest daughter of the Seirios Count family. Accepting her identity with warm adoration, he leaned in closer, embracing her in front of the stunned onlookers. The sudden sweep, he scooped her up in a bridal carry, loudly announcing to everyone present that he, Bael Ras Algul, was taking Lady Adiya as his bride. Blushing furiously, she gazed up at his confident smile, completely overwhelmed by the dramatic. Holding her close amidst falling petals, the third prince declared once more to all present that he took her as his bride, leaving her stunned in disbelieving joy. Watching the embrace, her sister could hardly believe her ears, questioning if such a miraculous turn of events could truly be real. Leaned in close to whisper softly against her cheek, swearing that he would never let her go again while her face flushed bright red. Overwhelmed by his proximity, she flusteredly protested that he was too close, reflecting that no one had ever spoken to her with such warmth before while he let out a soft chuckle. Unable to contain her overflowing emotion, she buried her face in her hands, weeping tears of pure relief and happiness. Cradled her face tenderly, reassuring her that she was his one and only, though her former fiancé broke in to sternly demand he restrain himself. Minded that they were standing in front of an entire crowd, she shrieked in sudden mortification. She caught her breath. He offered a quiet apology, admitting that holding her was the only thing that cured his severe head pain. Both sisters looked up in sudden surprise as he shifted the topic towards something far more serious. Revealed that upon physical contact, he felt her immense capacity for magic, concluding that her divine power had merely been depleted and needed rest to recover. Looking out over the quiet gardens, he stated plainly that her divine energy had not simply vanished but had been stolen. Her sister pondered who could have committed such a crime, noting how unprecedented it was given how rapidly her saintly power had originally manifested. Verify if her divine spark truly remained, the prince proposed performing a magic bestowal, shocking the onlookers. Turning to face her under the shaded trees, he cautioned that receiving magic bestowal carried great dangers, directly asking if she was ready to accept the risk. She swallowed hard, steeling her resolve for what was about to come. Her eyes sparkled with genuine wonder as she clasped her hands together in awe, marveling at the unbelievable truth. Nearby, the prince stood calm and composed alongside his attendants, their silent expressions contrasting her sudden surge of hope. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the onlookers, who had only ever read of magic bestowal as an abstract legend. Recognizing the grueling effort required to master such advanced arcana, the prince offered a quiet word of praise before turning to begin, prompting her to urgently call for him to wait. Stepping forward with clasped hands and a look of deep distress, her younger sister begged her to stop, warning against attempting such a perilous ritual. Younger girl continued her dramatic plea, claiming she was driven purely by sisterly concern over an unknown magic. Yet beneath her theatrical, tearful display lay a surging panic. She feared that if the ritual succeeded, everyone present would realize who the true saint really was. Dark memory flared in the girl's mind, the moment she had boldly declared herself to be the saint, enveloped in overwhelming magical energy. Shadowy figures in the court began to whisper among themselves, casting doubt on whether the fallen saint was merely showing off theoretical knowledge she could never actually cast. Exploiting the crowd's doubts, the younger sister feigned sympathetic pity, loudly lamenting how cruel it was for someone devoid of talent to keep trying in vain. The target of her taunts could only bow her head in silent endured pain. Cascade of painful memories washed over her. A lifetime of being cast aside, mocked as useless, and forced into the shadows while her sister was showered with praise as a genius. Suddenly, a cold, harsh voice cut through the whispers as Prince Bael commanded the room to shut up. Lowering himself onto one knee, he took her hand in a gentle grip, ignoring the court entirely as he softly asked her what she truly wished to do. Looking down at him, her heart stirred with overwhelming emotion as she realized he was the first person to ever truly listen to her. Warm blush spread across her cheeks as his steadfast presence validated her emotions rather than dismissing them. Pressing her hands to her chest with tear-filled eyes, she begged him with all her heart to proceed with the ritual. As the prince stood beside her to perform the legendary act, onlookers recalled that magic bestowal was an elite, highly complex spell documented exclusively within the Imperial archives. Uncertain whispers echoed through the hall, questioning why the prince would risk his own immense magical power on someone so fragile, wondering if his bond and compatibility with her ran far deeper than anyone realized. She expressed her desire to test her holy power and try the new magic, prompting Prince Bael to give his solemn assent. Instructing her to close her eyes and take a deep breath, he gently held her from behind as a warm, surging power sank deep into her heart, enveloping her in a sense of complete protection. A brilliant wave of divine radiance erupted around her, commanding the awe and undivided attention of everyone gathered in the courtyard. The quiet whisper he urged her to unleash her full potential, triggering a massive surge of holy magic that swept across the grounds. Enveloped in a pillar of blinding sacred light, her latent power erupted in all its magnificent brilliance. The dazzling light washed over the surrounding area. The onlookers watched in sheer disbelief at the overwhelming force of the purification ritual. Gathered noble onlookers marveled at how clear the air had become, questioning among themselves how they could have ever doubted her extraordinary saintly power. Astonished by the magnitude of what she had just accomplished, she stared at her hands, barely able to comprehend that this immense display was her own doing. Meanwhile, Laila gasped in horror as she felt her stolen magic rapidly draining away, leaving her trembling in sudden desperation. Gently raising her hand to his lips, the prince praised her performance with quiet admiration, calling her worthy of being his bride. While Prince Bael warmly invited her to rest at his side to recover her strength, Laila frantically called out to Shihab in a desperate bid for help. Shihab stood frozen, a subtle blush on his cheeks as he stared at her in utter shock and growing realization. Marking on the sheer magnificence of the sacred display, Shihab tried to dismiss his inner turmoil when questioned by Laila. Panicked at the thought of losing her stolen status, Laila insisted that they bring her sister back home immediately before it was too late. Firmly stepping between them, the prince declared that he would never return her to a household that abused her, completely shutting down Laila's desperate demands. Stood steadfastly beside Adiya as Laila wept dramatically, exclaiming how cruel it was to be accused of theft. Adiya watched in quiet resignation, expecting everyone to side with her sister as they always had. Yet he drew near, pulling her close into a reassuring embrace that instantly dispelled her lingering doubts. Soft blush dusted her cheeks as he whispered comforting words, filling her heart with the quiet conviction that as long as he believed in her, she could endure anything. Meanwhile, surrounded onlookers began to murmur about the appalling revelation that Adiya had been reduced to a maid in her former home. At the same time, Laila gasped in horror as the divine emblem on her skin began to vanish completely. Crowds' whispers grew louder, condemning the parents who allowed a younger sister to disgrace her elder sibling and seize her engagement, publicly shaming the family's deceitful actions. Desperate for support, Laila called out to Shihab, reaching out toward her fiancé as he began to distance himself from the scandal. Ignoring her pleas, Shihab turned his back and walked away without so much as a backward glance. Laila stumbled after him, pleading for him to stop, but Shihab knew that opposing a prince of the Algul Empire would be ruinous and chose to quietly retreat. Quickened his pace across the courtyard, leaving a desperate Laila struggling to catch up behind him. Nobles continued to gossip in hushed tones, wondering how long Adiya and the formidable third prince had known one another. Dark shadows fell across Laila's face as her panic gave way to a chilling, malice-filled glare. Watching Bael hold Adiya so gently, Laila seethed with deep resentment, refusing to forgive her sister for reclaiming what she believed was hers. In her twisted mind, she deluded herself into believing that her elder sister's holy power rightfully belonged to her. Escaping the court drama, Prince Bael safely escorted Adiya to the grand guest palace of the Maya theocratic kingdom, where attendants warmly welcomed them. Led her inside a magnificent, spacious chamber, assuring her that this would be her room and inviting her to make herself entirely at home. Stood quietly beside her, watching as she marveled with wide glowing eyes at the pure beauty of her new quarters. Overwhelmed by emotional relief, she sank onto the edge of the plush bed, realizing with profound gratitude that her days trapped in a dark, cold room were finally over. Turning to him with tears of genuine happiness, she exclaimed that she had never seen such a magnificent room, and thanked him from the bottom of her heart. Softened by her genuine joy, he gently pulled her into a warm embrace, glad that the gesture brought her peace. Reflecting on how bizarre it was for a highborn lady to suffer such extreme mistreatment, he wondered what kind of horrors she had endured. Turning to his trusted attendant Zel, he sternly ordered a full, immediate investigation into her family's The Merope Marquisate. Flowers lay scattered across the floor as a young lady stood trembling in silence within her chamber. Attendant approached her nervously, struggling to process the startling news that His Highness the Prince had taken a liking to her sister instead. He went on to deliver an urgent message directly from Lord Shihab, leaving the young woman stunned by the turn of events. Meanwhile, inside the guest room of the state guest house in the Holy Kingdom of Meria, Prince Bael was informed that a message had been dispatched to His Majesty, the Emperor, announcing that his bride had been located. Turning toward his guest, he presented his personal attendant, Zell, explaining that he would be acting as butler and assisting with any needs during her stay. Zell adjusted his glasses. He secretly resolved to observe closely to determine whether she was truly worthy of becoming the prince's bride. Gracious composure, the young maiden introduced herself as Adiya Seirios. Zell was quietly struck by her refined charm and elegance, noting that despite her harsh upbringing, her poise remained impeccable as he announced her bath was prepared. Prince gently assured her to rest and take all the time she needed before she was escorted down the corridor by the attendants. As they walked toward the bath chambers, the maiden noticed that the maids' uniforms differed from those typically worn in the royal palace. She pondered quietly to herself about the true origins of the maids walking beside her. Unbeknownst to her, the maids harbored hidden resentment, complaining in secret about having to attend to someone they viewed as a useless saintess as they guided her into the dressing room. Inside, they presented a lavish selection of daily items ordered by Lord Bael, though she hesitated, reluctant to accept such extravagant gifts. She recalled the prince's thoughtful gesture, remembering how he had personally arranged every detail with her comfort in mind. The attendant urged her to accept the garments as a favor, reminding her that Lord Bael never takes back his word, prompting her to yield softly. Concerned for her well-being, the maid requested to inspect her legs after hearing she had taken a fall, revealing severe bruises beneath her hem. She felt embarrassed by the state of her bruised legs, but the head maid gently reassured her. The maid presented a special magical ointment designed to fade scars, confirming the rumors of her past mistreatment. Applying the ointment carefully to her injuries, the maid promised that diligent use would heal her legs completely. She gasped in awe as the magical cream began taking effect immediately, smoothing away the severe discoloration. Amazed by the advanced magic of the Empire, she eagerly asked the maids to share more about their realm, to which they gladly obliged. The attendants warmly encouraged her to relax and make herself at home, offering their full devotion to her comfort. Resting peacefully, she marveled at how long it had been since she felt truly safe without needing to stay on guard. Deeply moved that Prince Bael had prepared everything for her. Looking down at her hands, a tender thought crossed her mind, wondering if the unseen wounds within her heart might also fade in time. Dressed in her stunning new gown, she greeted Prince Bael's tale express her gratitude. Though she worried the attire might not suit her, he assured her with earnest admiration that she was breathtaking. She blushed deeply and thanked him as he held her hands gently. From the side, Zell cleared his throat to remind the prince of his proper decorum. Unbothered by the interruption, Bael softly requested that she address him simply by his name, pointing out that he already called her by hers. Blushing softly himself, he confessed that he disliked being treated like a stranger by her. Overcome with sweet embarrassment, she shyly agreed and spoke his name aloud, sending a flutter through both their hearts. Without warning, Bael pulled her into a warm, sudden embrace, softly whispering his gratitude against her shoulder as Zell watched on in dismay. Moments later, the prince unexpectedly collapsed onto the sofa, resting his head directly in her lap. Looking up at her with weary eyes, he apologized and revealed that holding her was the only thing that made his chronic headaches disappear. He rested silently, his complexion appearing noticeably pale as she observed him, realizing he must have been suffering from the nightmare's effects even during the grand evening. As his breathing settled into a quiet rhythm, she felt a profound sense of gratitude for his kindness and the genuine warmth of the palace staff. Looking toward the standing servants, she pondered if there was anything she could do to ease their burden after being reassigned to this remote palace. Gently placing her hands near him, she silently prayed that her presence would offer even a small measure of comfort to his troubled mind. The soft atmosphere surrounding them drew quiet reverence from the watching attendants. Finding true peace by her side, his expression relaxed as the lingering pain eased away. Noticing the visible improvement in his color, she mentioned it softly, prompting the head butler to offer a polite apology. Butler explained that the prince had suffered from severe insomnia for a long time, asking if she might allow him to rest on her lap just a little longer. He readily agreed, tenderly stroking his hair while reflecting on how terrifying sleep must be when trapped in nightmarish visions. Cradling him gently, she wished him sweet, undisturbed dreams. Looking forward to their upcoming move to the Empire, she wondered if peaceful days like these would truly continue. Later, the butler provided a detailed report to the prince, noting her old scars and her initial extreme wariness around the staff. The call of her startled reactions underscored just how guarded and fearful she had been upon arrival. The report detailed how she insisted on doing her own washing and selecting plain attire, revealing a background filled with hardship rather than noble privilege. Meanwhile, back at Count Sirius's mansion, ominous declarations regarding the eradication of evil foretold coming conflict. Inside the dining hall, the Seirios family celebrates Laila's return, marveling that Adiya was chosen as the prince's bride. You see this inwardly with resentment, furious that Lord Shihab cast her aside for her sister. Mind flashes back to past cruelties, remembering how she made Adiya clean up broken glass until her hands bled. He recalls striking Adiya in front of their parents, who immediately scolded her for her incompetence. Parents express false sympathy for her current situation, wondering if she feels lonely without her sister. The effect of the dream demon's power begins to fade from the household servants, causing their subconscious control to slip. She realizes her divine power is draining rapidly and that she needs her parents' help to bring Adiya back. Putting on a worried facade, she feigns deep concern for her sister being taken to a terrifying foreign empire. She manipulates her parents, suggesting they petition the king to order Adiya's return before she embarrasses the family. Father eagerly jumps at the idea, realizing a royal petition could grant him the title of Marquis. Cold, calculating look flashes across her face as her scheme takes hold. He urges her parents to contact His Majesty immediately, bitterly thinking that she should have gone to the palace instead. Dark thoughts consume her, resolving to reclaim her status the moment Adiya steps foot back in the house. He visualizes binding Adiya once more, ensuring her sister remains completely under her sinister influence. Shadowy, sinister aura wraps around her, sealing her malicious intent toward her sister. She suddenly clapped her hands together with excitement, struck by a bright idea, and loudly declared that they should host a grand farewell party. Parents quickly agreed with the plan, reasoning that a public gathering would clear up the widespread rumors that they had mistreated Adiya, while deciding to request an audience with her the very next day. Deep down, Laila fiercely harbored the dark conviction that her sister's divine power rightfully belonged only to her, vowing never to allow Adiya to become the prince's consort. Heavy rain poured down over the grand estate, her possessive determination echoed against the dark storm, swearing that she would never surrender her sister to anyone. Meanwhile, Adiya stood quietly by the rain-streaked window, gazing out into the gloomy downpour with a solemn. Looking out the window, Adiya sees a carriage from her family home, arriving at the palace. Prince Bael places a gentle hand on her shoulder, pointing out the arrival of her family's carriage. Holding her close, he remarks quietly that an uninvited guest has arrived at the detached palace. Adiya's parents burst in loudly, demanding to see their daughter while guards try to hold them back. Parents claim they were worried after hearing she was brought to the detached palace instead of returning home. They offer insincere apologies to the prince for their daughter's selfishness, commanding her to come home immediately. Standing beside her, Prince Bael notes how her parents completely refuse to listen to her, glares sternly, accusing them of being the type of parents who abuse their own daughter. Pointing accusingly, he calls their disgraceful behavior improper and questions if they are true parents at all. The cold command, the prince orders his guards to throw her parents out. Guards seize the screaming couple as they desperately claim this is all a simple misunderstanding. Plead from the floor, insisting they only guided her strictly for her own sake to become a proper saint. Painful memories flash through Adiya's mind of her parents constantly berating her, calling her a useless mistake. Clenching her chest, she wonders silently if their harsh treatment was supposed to represent love. Parents dramatically feign affection, begging for forgiveness and claiming their cruelty was just passionate guidance. She quietly lowered her gaze as her family's desperate pleas echoed through the grand hall, begging her to return home just once more before her marriage into the empire. Overwhelmed by their relentless appeals to celebrate together, one last time, she finally gave in and whispered her agreement. Father called out to her as she announced her intention to return home, but the prince immediately stepped forward, firmly insisting that he would accompany her. Surprised by his sudden declaration, she turned back to face him. Father quickly interjected, insisting their humble home was unfit to host the prince and urging that this final gathering remain strictly a family affair. He turned to his daughter, pressuring her to agree that they should spend this time alone. Deep inside, she had always harbored a quiet longing to be cherished by her family, clinging to memories of warmth and celebration that she so desperately wished were real. Viewing this brief return as her final opportunity to mend the broken bond with her parents, she resolved to face them once more. Turning to the prince, she gently asked to be allowed to go alone. She felt it was better to face her family without him present, reluctant to expose the fragile, painful reality of her familial ties before his eyes. Prince gazed down at her with a heavy heart, sensing her hesitation yet recognizing the quiet determination in her eyes. Reluctantly giving in to her wishes, he ultimately agreed to stay behind as her family let out a collective sigh of relief. Though uncertainty still lingered, she chose to place her trust in her family once more, hoping against hope that their affection was genuine as the prince watched her depart with silent concern. She arrived at the grand gathering, the room buzzed with the whispers of curious guests who marveled at the extravagant farewell party, assuming that her presence proved the painful rumors of her mistreatment were entirely unfounded. Confused by the crowded hall, she questioned why a private family gathering had transformed into a public spectacle, only for her parents to smoothly dismiss her concerns by claiming it was simply more practical to accommodate everyone at once. Looking around the room, her heart sank as she spotted her former fiancé among the attendees, while her sister was nowhere to be found. She asked about her sister's absence. Her mother merely offered an enigmatic, dismissive smile. Brushing her questions aside, her mother insisted that as the guest of honor, she ought to focus on greeting the noble crowd. Father suddenly raised his voice to proudly parade her before the crowd as the prince's future bride, prompting her to urgently object that no such match had been finalized. She stood stunned as her parents sternly commanded her to act with dignity, reminding her of her upcoming status as the prince's consort. Flanked by her cold family, she felt isolated amidst their stern, demanding gazes. Father warned her to suppress any disgraceful rumors, insisting she accept her future title. Meanwhile, the surrounding nobles offered insincere congratulations, praising her upbringing and the family's secured status. Father laughed heartily, basking in the praise of the gathered aristocrats. Looking at the extravagant feast, she realized all her favorite dishes were actually Laila's, proving her parents parents only cared about her new title. The dining table, her father continued to address her as the prince's consort, ignoring her plea to stop using the title. Then shamelessly declared that a count's household was insufficient for the prince's family, preparing to ask her a favor. Parents pressed her to use Prince Badel's infatuation with her to elevate their family status to the rank of marquis. She stared in disbelief as they casually asserted that the prince would grant any request she made. Horrified, she listened as her father framed this self-serving demand as an opportunity to prove her worth, noting the king could not refuse the empire's request. Falsely claimed this was for her protection in the terrifying empire, arguing that a higher family status would prevent her from suffering. A chilling realization struck her that her family did not care about her well-being at all. Behind their smiling facades lay pure greed and a desire to exploit their own daughter for status. Excusing herself from the table, she walked away in silence while her family dismissed her exit as weak-willed behavior. She had always longed for nothing more than the simple love of her parents, yet she was forced to confront the harsh reality of her solitude. Every affection and gesture had merely been exploited for their own selfish benefit. Determined to leave first thing in the morning with only her few books and minimal belongings, she realized Laila had already claimed every gift from her parents and Lord Shihab. She searched her sparse room, her attention caught on a strange book she could not recall ever owning. Reaching out toward it, she gasped in horror as a shadowy mirror revealed a terrifying demonic visage reflecting back at her. Dark abyss-like threshold opened beneath her feet, instantly trapping her as she faltered in disbelief. Panic seized her as she realized her divine power was failing, her remaining strength draining rapidly into the dark void despite her desperate cries for help. Calling out to Laila for salvation against the nightmare demon, she looked up only to see her sister approaching with an ominous silence. Adiya pleaded for help against the monster. Laila simply smiled cruelty, mocking her sister for being a useless saint who could accomplish nothing on her own. With an eerie grin, Laila raised her glowing hand, praising a dark deity that granted her power. Adiya watched in shock as her own holy power was forcefully siphoned away and absorbed directly into her sister. Reduced to crawling disgracefully on the floor, Adiya listened as Laila taunted her pathetic state, revealing her true nature. Dark energy surged aggressively, crushing Adiya to her knees as Laila stood triumphantly over her weakening body. Laila spat vicious accusations at her, accusing her of seducing Lord Shihab and torturing her own sister before striking her down violently. Cold fury, Laila recalled how Adiya was ultimately cast out from the Merope family house, stripped of everything she once held. She unleashed her fury, memories of Lord Shihab resurfaced, how he had deemed it wise to lay low before the prince of the Algul Empire, while secretly marveling at how radiant Adiya had become. She screamed that everything was her sister's fault, unleashing a brutal blast that sent Adiya screaming to the ground. As Adiya weakly begged her to stop, she viciously accused her sister of always stealing what was rightfully hers. Insisting that Lord Shihab and the title of saintess belonged solely to her, she demanded Adiya surrender her magical essence, swearing she would never allow her sister to travel to the empire or become the prince's consort. The manic twisted grin and the dark emblem on her hand pulsing with stolen energy, she declared with absolute malice that Adiya's magic would belong to her forever. Left broken and collapsed on the ground, Adiya weakly wept for someone to save her. As her strength ebbed away, her ring began to faint light, and with her final breath, she called out that the manic grin. Laila declares that her sister's powers now belong to her. In a desperate moment, a call for help goes out to battle as strong winds sweep through. Sending swiftly from the sky, a dark figure leaps in to intervene. Landings violently between the sisters, Prince Bael shields Adiya from her attacker. The swift motion, he draws his blade to subdue the aggressor. Before he can strike, Adiya cries out, begging him to stop. Plea halts his attack mid-air, leaving Laila trembling in shock on the ground. Turning back toward her, Bael questions why she would protect the very person who caused her so much pain, warns her sternly that showing mercy to such a person will only invite repeated betrayal. He answers softly that despite everything, Laila is still her only sister. Suddenly, dark marks flare across Bael's neck as he groans in sudden unbearable agony. Overcome by the sleeping sickness curse, Bael collapses heavily onto the ground. Laila watches from a distance, questioning why her sister would ever consider leaving her. She offers a cruel bargain, promising to spare Prince Bael's life only if Adiya vows never to abandon her again. Bael's life hanging in the balance, Adiya is forced to choose between letting him die or surrendering her freedom. She refused to yield, channeling every ounce of her magic into the fallen prince despite the lingering doubts that had plagued her throughout her life. Reaching skyward through a burst of shimmering radiance, she vowed never to surrender again. Under the soothing warmth of her power, the darkness encasing the prince began to dissolve as he stirred back to consciousness. Blinding light enveloped her completely, eclipsing the malicious hold her sister had attempted to claim. True potential fully awakened in that moment, revealing her as the first grand saint the world had seen in over a century. Sparkles of divine energy cascaded around her, settling gently as the surge of magic reached its peaceful peak. Prince Bael tenderly reached out to rest his hand against her hair, offering a soft smile of praise for her remarkable feat. Laila whined bitterly in jealousy at the affection showered upon her sister, even as Bael pulled the young maiden into a tight, protective embrace. Suddenly, the household adults rushed into the chamber in utter disarray, startled by the commotion, frozen horror upon finding Prince Bael present, demanding to know why a royal figure was inside the room. Drawing his sword with cold authority, Bael proclaimed that harming the future consort of the Algul Empire's crown prince was a treasonous offense. Abusers gasped in sheer terror, realizing the mortal peril they had brought upon themselves. Desperate to escape judgment, they prostrated themselves on the floor, begging for mercy while offering to lock away their own daughter to appease him. Instead, Bael commanded that they all be thrown into the dark underground cell, silencing Laila's panicked protests with a fierce shout. Father glared in venomous rage, hurling a final bitter insult at the daughter who had stripped them of their power. She watched in silence as her father turned his wrath upon her sister, harshly demanding if she understood the gravity of her actions, and accusing her of risking their entire family's execution. Prostrating themselves upon the floor, both her mother and sister wept bitterly, begging for forgiveness in the wake of their fallen status. Overcome by emotion, she leaned her head against her protector, her shoulders trembling from the lingering shock of the encounter. Prince reflected on the official investigation, remarking how her family had only ever worried about saving their own skins rather than showing genuine concern for her. Honoring her merciful request, the prince declared that he would grant her wish and spare their lives, though punishment was still inevitable. As they turned to leave the room, her sister cried out from the floor, breathlessly calling out her gratitude for the mercy shown to them. Gathering her closely into a reassuring embrace, the prince praised her courage, softly telling her not to worry any longer and to leave the rest in his hands. Escorting her past the astonished palace officials, the prince commanded that the joyous news of her awakening as the Grand Saintess be spread across the holy nation immediately to fully restore her rightful status. Meanwhile, down in the cold stone dungeons beneath the castle, the investigation into her long-standing abuse was formally concluded, leading to her family's immediate imprisonment. Stripped of her former luxury, her sister sat slumped against the iron bars of her dark cell, weeping uncontrollably in terror and regret. Clinging tightly to the iron grate, her sister screamed out in panic, begging her mother to help her escape the filthy, shadows-drenched cell. Instead of offering comfort, her mother coldly instructed the guards to lock the cell tight, determined to ensure the girl would never appear before the new saintess again. Shocked by the brutal rejection, her sister stared through the bars with wide, disbelieving eyes, desperately crying out for her mother one last time. Without even turning around, her mother delivered a cruel final blow, harsh words echoing through the stone hallway that giving birth to her had been a mistake. Single hand reached helplessly between the rusted bars, grasping at the cold air as total isolation closed in. As her parents turned their backs and exited through the heavy wooden door, a cold smirk played upon her lips. Iron bars slammed shut behind them, leaving her alone in the darkness to whisper that they got exactly what they deserved. This place was the Chamber of Seals, an underground vault beneath House Seirios, designed to contain malevolent relics from monsters vanquished by generations of Grand Saintesses. Heavy chains wrapped securely around locked cages, binding dark and dangerous entities within the subterranean depths. Sitting huddled on the cold stone floor, she realized with mounting dread that if matters continued on this path, her father and the rest of her family would abandon her to save themselves, leaving her to be executed. In a panic, she raised her hands to inspect her palms, searching desperately for any remaining trace of divine favor. Her heart sank as she saw that the saint's crest had completely vanished from her skin, and even the dark voice of the nightmare demon that once guided her had fallen dead silent. Slowly, she turned her gaze toward the heavily chained cage where a feral, terrifying beast glared out from the shadows. Driven to the edge of sanity, a manic grin twisted her face as she decided that if the world insisted on treating her like a monster, she would become precisely the monster they feared. With reckless abandon, she reached out and shattered the magical lock binding the creature's chains. Sparks of magic burst from the broken link. Memories of her sister's pure ethereal beauty flashed through her mind. Facing the monstrous beast emerging from its broken cell, she convinced herself with sinister certainty that no matter what terrible sin she committed, her saintly sister would always. Several days had passed since the terrifying assault on Adiya. Walking together through a vibrant field of poppies, she marvels at the vast expanse of flowers while the third prince asks if strolling through them helps her feel a little better, to which she quietly agrees. Remembering the terrifying ordeal she suffered just days prior, the weight of that harrowing experience lingers heavily in the air. She softly acknowledges the trauma, her gaze downcast as she relives the dreadful memory. Expressing her gratitude, she notes that her magic has thanks to Prince Bael, who gently advises her not to push herself too hard. Interrupting their moment, an attendant arrives to report urgent news from the holy nation of Maya. Acknowledging the summons, the prince excuses himself briefly to address the matter, telling her to rest while she sees him off. Left alone in the quiet meadow, petals drift gently through the quiet breeze around her. Sudden confusion grips her as her vision darkens unexpectedly, prompting her to turn around thinking the prince might have returned. Dark cloak swirls in the mist as a figure approaching through the field addresses her by name, claiming to have come to pick her up. Though he appears to be Prince Bael reaching out his hand, an intense pressure radiates from him, making her realize with growing unease that something is terribly wrong. Looking up into his eyes, she freezes as a slit-pupiled, demonic gaze stares back at her. Panic sets in as he asks what is wrong while her body refuses to obey her, completely paralyzed as he commands her to come with him. Calling her my saint with a sinister grin, he grabs her wrists tightly, ignoring her desperate cries to stop and let her go. Pulling her close against his chest, he whispers sinisterly into her ear that he will not let her escape. Shaking off his hold and stepping back in terror, she demands to know his true identity. Dropping his disguise with an eerie calm, the imposter sinisterly angrily remarks that she figured it out quickly. She recoiled as an illusion of her sister appeared before her, offering a gentle escape into a pleasant dream rather than forcing her to face her painful reality. Imposter confirmed her suspicions, revealing that the spirit Morpheus, which fed on nightmares, had been corrupted by a dream demon and sealed away as a terrifying monster. Stepping back in fear, she realized the entity bore the exact face of Lord Battle, who boastfully taunted that even the legendary saint from a century past could only manage to seal him away. Hearing her beloved's voice emanating from such a malicious creature proved overwhelming, threatening to crush her remaining strength. Inching closer until his breath touched her skin, the demon remarked sinisterly on her pleasant scent, leaving her paralyzed with horror. Upping her cheek with cold intent, he took dark pleasure in sensing the profound dread washing over her. Pulling her close against her will, the monster declared his desire to devour her terror, while she choked out a desperate plea for him to stop. He continued to whisper toxic lies into her ear, attempting to break her resolve by insisting that she was unloved and destined to be cast aside. Reaching out an open hand, he enticingly urged her to abandon her struggle and join him in a realm devoid of suffering. Hypnotic ripples expanded across her vision as the entity promised to transport her into a paradise of endless sweet dreams. Sensing her willpower falter, she quietly pondered whether living in such a painless dream world might have allowed her family to truly love her. Bittersweet visions of an alternate life flooded her thoughts. A world where her rigorous training was acknowledged, her saintly duties celebrated, and her betrothal left intact. Even within these tempting illusions, her mind tethered itself to reality as she remembered how Lord Battle had repeatedly come to her rescue during her darkest moments. Deep within her spirit, the memory of his genuine warmth sparked a fierce longing to see the real Lord Battle once more. Rejecting the demon's deceitful sanctuary, she shattered the mental trap with an unwavering decree that she would choose to live in the real world alongside Lord Battle. She watched in shock as dark energy shattered, revealing the small creature trapped within the dispelled illusion. Tiny rounded spirit pleaded weakly for help, trapped inside a glowing crystal shell on the grass. He realized with awe that the creature was actually the Great Spirit, controlled against its will by the nightmare demon. Kneeling beside it in the quiet forest clearing, she offered her gentle presence to soothe the exhausted spirit. The creature expressed faint gratitude before drifting into a peaceful slumber, relieved of its long torment. Suddenly, alarming cries rang out nearby as guards announced the barrier had been breached. Prince Bael arrived hurriedly, shielding her, as troops swarmed the clearing to restrain the intruder. Laila manipulated the situation, playing the victim and turning the surrounding onlookers against her sister. Falsely accusing her sister of breaking a monster's seal, Laila publicly disowned her with feigned sadness. In the Grand Hall, the formal judgment was delivered, stripping her family of noble title to appease the Empire's might. Lord Battle demonstrated the Empire's overwhelming authority, leaving the local nobles trembling in fear. Announcement of the engagement caused political shockwaves, exposing the vast military disparity between the realms. Outraged aristocrats demanded harsh punishment for trespassing and endangering Prince Bael and Lady Adiya. Final sentence was passed, condemning the young trespasser to exile in a remote convent. Guards dragged her away as she protested in vain, her status completely stripped away. High stone walls marked the remote edge of the realm, guarding the boundary beyond which disgraced souls were cast out. The wooden wagon rattled past the fortified iron gates. She suddenly realized with a sudden jolt of terror that they were leaving the kingdom entirely behind. Desperate, she demanded to know why they were not turning toward the convent as promised, only to be ruthlessly abandoned on the dirt road as her escorts rode away. Left alone amidst the menacing silhouettes of the deep woods, the cold parting words declared that an impostor deserved to perish in such a place. She screamed after the vanishing wagon, her voice cracking as dark, sinister figures began to materialize in the gloom around her. Glowing, predatory eyes peered through the black trunks of the forest, closing in on the helpless exile. A final desperate cry for her sister's help echoed harmlessly into the indifferent canopy before fading away. Far from the dark woods, the grand cathedral swelled with solemn majesty as the high authority proclaimed the praise of Adiya Seirios, the one who had purified the great spirit Morpheus. Adorned in an ornate flowing bridal gown with intricate lacework, Adiya walked down the carpeted aisle to be officially recognized as the Great Saint. Before the altar bathed in celestial light, she knelt reverently as the sovereign bestowed the sacred holy sanction upon her. Beneath her delicate veil, tears of quiet relief and profound gratitude shimmered in her soft eyes as she accepted the honor. The assembled nobility broke into enthusiastic applause, hailing her as the true saint who broke the lingering nightmare. Whispers of awe swept through the hall at a miracle unmatched in 100 years, leading to the decree that she was to be adopted into the royal family of Maya as a princess. Showerings of flower petals cascaded through the grand hall as her formal engagement to Prince Bael was declared to the celebrating court. Standing together under the falling petals, Prince Bael held her gently, his rare smile mirroring the peaceful joy shining on her face. She stood beside her royal groom amidst the shower of flower petals and the cheers of the crowd. Her former fiancé watched silently from the back, realizing the depth of the affection she once held for him. Memories flooded his mind of happier days when her affection was absolute. Holding hands, shared moments of tenderness, and her gentle devotion-filled smile reserved entirely for him. Vividly recalled the warmth of that genuine smile, a testament to the unwavering love she had once offered so freely. Overwhelmed by regret, he lowered his gaze in sorrow, wondering where along the path he had lost her. The palace annex, the designated time finally arrived. Light shattered around the tapper's spirit as Adiya released her dormant power. Commanding the ancient entity to awaken, she channeled her holy energy, surrounding them both in a swirling tempest of light. Responding to her call, the great spirit Morpheus broke free from the shadowy corruption that had bound it for a century. Thinking in confusion, the spirit looked around, while behind them, Bael and the others commended Adiya's incredible feat. He gently embraced the bewildered creature, softly asking if it was in any lingering pain. Overjoyed by her kindness, Morpheus snuggled into her arms, eagerly offering to become her formal familiar. Observing the bond, Bael noted that the power to contract a spirit familiar was thought lost since ancient times, proving her power surpassed even the first holy saint. A brilliant flash of sacred light erupted as the bonding ceremony commenced. Adiya clasped her hands in prayer, bestowing her holy energy onto the spirit. Accepting the sacred blessing, Morpheus pledged his loyalty to his new master as a glowing crest materialized. The contract sealed, the spirit joyfully vowed to protect her forever. Turning to Prince Bael shortly after, she timidly requested a small favor. Soon after, they ventured outside into the bustling city streets where Morpheus floated merrily around her. Watching her smile, the spirit remarked how much happier she seemed here compared to her constrained past at House Seirios. Following silently behind, Bael gazed at her with a quiet, contemplative expression. Seemed to be thoroughly enjoying their time together, handing her a fluffy treat while onlookers observed his subtle contentment. Guiding her toward a high-end boutique, he invited her to step inside and explore the shop. He recalled how she had once been forced to carry packages outside this very establishment, highlighting the stark contrast with her current situation. Explaining that everything chosen so far had been according to his taste, he encouraged her to select whatever she preferred, earning her sincere gratitude. Adiya emerged in a new dress she had long wished to try on, nervously asking for his opinion on how it suited her. Offered a warm, gentle smile, assuring her that the outfit suited her remarkably well as Morpheus looked on. Reaching out, he carefully adjusted the delicate hair ribbon adorning her dress, remarking that it looked even prettier that way. Leaning closer with an affectionate touch, he drew a soft expression from her as she offered her heartfelt thanks. Morpheus suddenly squeezed between them, teasingly protesting that the prince was getting far too close. Playful interruption brought a bright, radiant smile to her face, which he watched with quiet, fond amusement. Turning toward the shop attendant, he prepared to conclude their visit, instructed the staff to deliver anything that suited her outfit directly to the annex, stunning her with his generous decree. Meanwhile, at the Marquis Merope residence, chaotic shouts echoed through the halls as Shihab was berated by his father and urged to apologize to Adiya. His father fumed over the disgraceful spectacle at House Seirios, warning that such foolishness threatened to ruin their family and lead to confinement. Stripped of his holy knight qualifications until forgiven, Shihab was turned away from the palace annex, left wandering the streets in despair as he wondered where she had gone. Stared down at the small box in his hands, reminiscing about the day he had proposed to Adiya, and wondering if she still remembered that moment. Nearby in the bustling market, onlookers commented on how perfectly suited Lady Adiya and Prince Bael looked together, unaware that he was watching them from a distance. Leaving this encounter to be divine fate, he shoved his way through the shop crowd and called out to Adiya, startling both her and the prince. Dropping to one knee before her, he presented the box and begged her to accept his proposal once more, instantly provoking Prince Bael's fierce displeasure. Pleaded for her forgiveness, claiming he had been deceived by Laila and asking her to remember the sacred bond they had once shared. In response, Prince Bael drew his sword and pressed the cold blade against his neck, warning him against such blatant audacity. Observers noted that his brazen demeanor showed a total lack of genuine remorse for his past actions. Bael sternly reprimanded him for addressing the future crown princess so casually, yet he insisted he could not stand by while she was taken to the Argul Empire. Lowering himself completely to the floor, he prostrated himself before them both, offering a desperate and formal apology for all the pain he had caused. Pressing his forehead against the ground, he begged for a single opportunity to make amends, to which Prince Bael coldly granted him leave to speak. He confessed that his former coldness had stemmed from feelings of intense jealousy, declaring that he had always loved only her from the very beginning. He offered a precious family heirloom brooch, presenting it as a symbol to renew their broken engagement. As they turned to depart from the store, he continued to kneel on the floor, desperately begging her not to walk away from him. Protected within Prince Bael's embrace, Adiya looked back at him with unwavering resolve and firmly rejected his plea. Stunned into total silence, he could only stare in shock as his final desperate hope crumbled completely. His desperate pleas met only cold finality as she looked at him and admitted that she had never truly loved him. He reminded him of how he had never once offered aid when she suffered, calling him out for shifting the blame entirely onto Laila when he was the true culprit. Turning her back on him, Bael gently guided her away, leaving the young nobleman behind to stammer out a futile plea for them to wait. Left completely alone, he collapsed to his knees, utterly defeated as his former life crumbled away. Tears welled in his eyes, dropping silently as the overwhelming reality of his loss set in. Time passed, bringing forth a glorious celebration as Adiya and Prince Bael were united in a grand wedding, surrounded by cheering crowds wishing them eternal happiness. Leaning in close, Bael leaned down to softly kiss his radiant bride. Before their lips could meet, the small spirit Morpheus suddenly burst between them with a squeak of protest. The little creature hilariously planted itself between the newlyweds, indignantly forbidding any romantic displays while Adiya giggled at the sight. She cradled Morpheus affectionately, her face beaming with pure, unburdened joy. Looking into Bael's eyes, she reflected on how drastically her life had transformed. With him at her side, every trace of past sorrow had faded into profound warmth. Radiating divine grace, she stretched out her arms to offer a heartfelt heartfelt wish that everyone across the kingdom might find their own true happiness. Miraculous power cascaded over the entire realm, showering light that cleansed the land of darkness and brought wonder to all who witnessed it. Meanwhile, far from the joyous festivities, a pair of dirtied hands gripped the iron bars of a cold prison cell. Confined within a desolate tower, Shihab stared out at the shimmering light, realizing with bitter despair that the holy purification washing over the land belonged to the saint he had lost forever. While he remained confined to his dark prison cell, Adiya rested her head lovingly against Prince Bael's shoulder, radiant with joy, as Morpheus fondly noted that she appeared happier than anyone else. Meanwhile, high above the moonlit skyline of the Argul Empire, an elegant noblewoman stood on a terrace as an attendant delivered word that Prince Bael had returned with his prospective crown princess. Scoffing at the news, the noblewoman dismissed the holy kingdom of Maya as nothing more than a backwater, asserting that no simple countryside girl could ever be fit to serve as crown princess. Her attendant bowed in agreement as she snapped her decorative fan shut with a sharp click. Turning around with a cold, calculating gaze, she resolved that they would need to make this young newcomer understand her place sooner rather. Arriving at the detached palace of Prince Bael within the Algul Empire, the grand estate stood as a towering testament to imperial prestige, signaling the start of a new chapter. Looking up at the overwhelming structure alongside Morpheus, she took a deep breath, steeling her heart with the realization that her new life was officially beginning. Stepping out of the carriage, Bael offered a steadying hand, warmly inviting her to rest inside after their grueling journey. As they approached the entrance, an elegant noblewoman waiting on the grand steps suddenly caught their attention. Without acknowledging her presence, the noblewoman rushed straight toward Bael, expressing concern for his fatigue and offering her magical energy to restore him. Standing completely ignored on the sidelines, she could only watch in stunned silence as the woman brushed past her without a single glance. Before the woman could touch him, however, Bael sharply knocked her reaching hand away. Looking down with an icy, unyielding glare, he made it abundantly clear that her assistance was entirely unnecessary, stating firmly that he already had her by his side. Feigning surprise, the noblewoman gasped and apologized profusely, claiming she had not even noticed her standing there as she politely reached out to greet her. Introducing herself as Narcisse Aldebaran, daughter of Marquis Debaran and Bael's childhood friend, she presented an image of flawless poise and beauty. Seeing such exquisite grace, she found herself quietly awed by the imperial noblewoman's perfect demeanor. With an affectionate gesture, Narcisse softly clasped her hands with a warm, reassuring squeeze. Expressing gentle sympathy for how anxious she must feel being so far from her homeland, Narcisse kindly encouraged her to rely on her for anything she might need. Overwhelmed by such unexpected kindness, she offered a timid thank you, feeling deeply ashamed for having misjudged the woman's initial intentions. Yet as she looked upon Bael's refined childhood companion, a wave of self-doubt crept into her heart, making her question if someone like herself truly belonged at his side, even as he called out her name. Sensing her sudden reserve, Bael reached out and rested a reassuring hand upon her shoulder. Gently notes that she must be exhausted from their journey, mentioning that tea has already been prepared for her. Expressing her quiet gratitude, she addresses him casually by name, prompting him to respond with tender affection. Overhearing the exchange, Narcisse hides behind her folding fan and snidely remarks that addressing the prince so informally is deeply disrespectful. The noblewoman attempts to lecture her on aristocratic etiquette. The prince instantly interjects with cold authority, suggesting that Narcisse herself is the one who needs a lesson in manners for arriving uninvited and demanding she be silent. Chastised by his harsh reprimand, the aristocratic lady bows down low and offers a formal apology before withdrawing. As she prepares to leave, the palace butler firmly instructs her to request a formal audience before visiting next time, to which she begrudgingly agrees. Once out of direct view, her pleasant facade completely crumbles into a bitter, resentful glare as she clicks her tongue. Handing off a small glass fuel to her attendant, she coldly orders her maid to dispose of it immediately. Meanwhile, as they walk through the grand corridors, a lingering sense of doubt quietly settles over the young saint regarding his past history. Her departing carriage, the noblewoman bids them a smooth farewell, promising they will meet again soon. Reaching their destination inside the imperial residence, the prince proudly opens the doors to present her new living quarters. He steps inside and gasps in sheer amazement at the magnificent sunlit room overflowing with vibrant floral displays. Praising the breathtaking beauty of the room, she inspects the familiar blossoms and asks if they are indeed what she thinks they are. Confirms her suspicion with a gentle gaze, explaining that these flowers were specially gathered from her home country. Adds that he had them magically preserved and transported directly from the Maya theocracy so that they would stay fresh for a very long time. Gently reached out to comfort her, offering a grand bouquet while acknowledging how daunting it must be to leave her homeland for the very first time. Overcome with relief at his tender gesture, she could only softly whisper his name. Without another word, he pulled her into a tight, lingering embrace, confessing how deeply he had longed for her during their long separation. Holding her close, he admitted that he had been eagerly anticipating this exact moment for the full 3 years since they first met. Dropping to one knee in a posture of complete devotion, he looked up at her and confessed that she had been in his thoughts, far more than she could ever imagine. Urged her to turn to him immediately whenever she needed anything, bringing tearful emotion to her eyes as she murmured his name. Pointed out that while loyal attendants were present to support her, He would far prefer it if she chose to rely on him before anyone else. Face illuminated with a brilliant, joyful smile as she readily agreed. Nearby, the attendants quietly noted the prince's desperate desire to ensure she stayed, marveling at how he managed to preserve delicate flowers in a realm where the soil was tainted with monster blood through sheer willpower. Senior Butler interjected to explain that Narcisse was merely an acquaintance from the prince's childhood, clarified that as a noblewoman of high standing, pride had driven Narcisse to greet the prince before all others, leaving the young saint to quietly process this revelation. Cutting the butler off, the prince made it clear he had no romantic interest in Narcisse, explaining that while her ability to amplify magic made her politically valuable, he had never relied on her power. Looking directly into her eyes, he vowed to protect her and reassured her that she had no reason to worry about Narcisse. He offered a soft nod of agreement before he suddenly caught sight of something outside the balcony and called her attention to it. Beyond the terrace lay a magnificent magic-shielded garden brimming with lush greenery. He revealed that it was an herb garden. Her face lit up with delight, and she eagerly asked to go down and explore it together. As she observed the surroundings, the small tapir spirit bounded through the air with delight, reveling in the soothing atmosphere while the prince confirmed that spirits indeed thrive in such purified spaces. Across the garden, groundskeepers could be seen mixing holy water into the soil, a delicate technique that allowed fragile flora to barely cling to life in the harsh terrain. Inspecting the vibrant rows of lavender, chamomile, and valerian, she marveled at the endless resources of the empire. Impressed by her knowledge, the prince warmly offered her free reign over the grounds to grow whatever herbs she desired. Deep desire took root in her heart to find a way to repay his generous hospitality and prove her worth. Simple thought of brewing soothing teas or preparing sweet treats for him filled her with an unfamiliar sense of warmth and excitement. She recalled her past, where such chores had felt like burdensome demands, realizing now how joyful those same actions felt when driven by genuine affection. Kneeling down onto the damp earth, she pressed her hands into the soil and allowed her divine holy power to surge outward through the ground. Instantly, the weak drooping herbs were bathed in a brilliant radiance, bursting forth with lush, vibrant life. Gardeners and the prince stood paralyzed in awe as the once corrupted earth blossomed vividly before their very eyes. Overwhelmed with gratitude for the miraculous renewal of their garden, the caretakers offered their heartfelt thanks while she beamed with genuine delight. Later that evening inside the imperial study, the prince sat slumped over an endless mountain of paperwork, visibly exhausted from his duties. A warm teacup was gently placed beside his desk along with soft words encouraging him to rest his weary mind. He presented him with herbal tea steeped from the newly revitalized garden. Savoring the calming aroma, he insisted she sit and share a cup with him. As they sat together, she offered a plate of freshly baked treats incorporating garden herbs, prompting him to inquire about the special ingredients. Despite his usual reluctance to partake in food prepared outside the royal kitchens, the prince gladly accepted her handmade creation, seeking relief from his persistent sleeplessness. Sat contentedly enjoying the treats alongside the spirit Morpheus, who firmly declared his decision to stay by Adiya's side despite the attendants attempting to usher him away. Realizing that this was perhaps their very first time being truly alone together, she looked upon his striking features, mesmerized as he softly called her name. Inviting her to sit right beside him, he caused her heart to race nervously as she scrambled to think of a light-hearted topic of conversation. Calling a recent dream, she mentioned seeing a fire, prompting him to wonder with concern if it might have been a prophetic vision. He quickly reassured him that it was a good omen, linking it happily to her upcoming lessons to become the princess consort. Determined to prove herself, she promised to work hard to become someone worthy of him, a sentiment he received with warm satisfaction. Seeing her enthusiasm, he noted how eager she seemed for what lay ahead. Leaning in closer, he assured her that while she was already cultured, she should come to him immediately if any trouble arose, leaving her flustered by his proximity. Without warning, he laid his head down, claiming her lap as his pillow and startling her completely. Resting comfortably, he confessed that while the tea and treats were wonderful, her lap was truly special, the ultimate remedy for his insomnia. Overwhelmed by his sudden intimacy, she offered a timid thank you as he chuckled softly at her reaction. Looking up at her with a tender smirk, he admitted how much he enjoyed seeing her flustered because of him. Teasingly, he pointed out that her reaction proved she was acutely conscious of him. Desperate to shift his attention away from her embarrassment, she sought another topic to discuss. Asking if she could borrow the library to prepare for her consort training, she received his prompt and easy agreement. He beamed with delight as the prince gently suggested that they study together, eagerly clapping her hands in agreement. As he rested comfortably on her lap, he mused on how her genuine refinement made her undeniably fit to be accepted as the princess consort. Meanwhile, deep within the quiet sanctuary of the Grand Library, an elderly woman stood before towering shelves of books, quietly questioning how another would perceive the unfolding. Inside the quiet library of the battle-detached palace, Adiya and Prince Bael sat together at a long wooden table, surrounded by towering bookshelves as Morpheus floated casually near them. Suddenly drawn toward a high shelf, the small spirit fluttered across the room and retrieved a curious relic that began to emit a soft magical light. The proud flourish, Morpheus hovered back to the table, proudly presenting the newly discovered emblem directly to Adiya. Examining the star-shaped crest, she marveled at its connection to the founding saint, while the spirit explained how he had lost the precious ribbon when darkness consumed him. though he had originally received it as a gift from the saint herself. Without warning, an overwhelming aura burst forth from the artifact, causing the open book to levitate into the air as bright rays of divine light illuminated the entire room, leaving both Bael and Adiya utterly astonished. Overcome by the sudden surge of ancient magic, she collapsed forward onto the table, prompting the alarmed prince to cry out her name in desperation. As Bael prepared to reach out and wake her, Morpheus urgently intervened, sternly warning him that attempting to force entry into her unconscious state could cause her delicate mind to shatter completely. Meanwhile, her consciousness awakened in a boundless, glowing plane of endless light, a familiar realm she recalled visiting once before during a twilight dream. Looking down, she gasped as she discovered the form of Bael lying motionless upon the ground, causing her to rush over in concern. Before she could reach him, a majestic figure draped in sacred vestments appeared before her, revealing herself as the founding saint and politely apologizing for summoning her so abruptly. Legendary entity expressed deep gratitude toward Adiya for saving Morpheus, explaining that the ribbon was a vessel of divine power created for him, and asked if she would restore its depleted energy. Understanding that the protective ward had been destroyed when the spirit was engulfed by shadow, she readily agreed to channel her own power to restore the sacred crest. Surrounded by swirlings of radiant light, she accepted the holy blessing from the founding saint, feeling the resonant power pass between their souls. With a serene smile, the ethereal matriarch entrusted her with a final plea to protect the cherished companion who wore the divine charm. Viewed with renewed divine essence, the ribbon glowed brilliantly once more, ready to deliver the founding saint's heartfelt sentiment back to Morpheus. He listened attentively as the founding saint gently praised her kind heart, noting that a lesser soul would have succumbed to the darkness, but her pure spirit was precisely why she remained unharmed. Suddenly, a surge of overwhelming warmth coursed through her, illuminating her body in a radiant flash. Divine magic surged through every fiber of her being, filling her with unprecedented strength. The ethereal figure bestowed an even greater blessing upon her, offering a token of affection as gratitude for saving Morpheus and restoring the sacred ribbon. Handing over a shimmering fragment, the saint explained that this lost piece of Bael's magic, stolen by a dream demon, would fully restore his true power if he were to consume it. She marveled at the revelation, realizing Bael had fought heroically despite being far from his full strength, and expressed her deep gratitude to the saint. Heartfelt gratitude, the saint parted from her, leaving her standing peacefully amidst glowing embers of divine light. Left alone in the quiet expanse of the realm, she paused, suddenly contemplating how she would manage to wake up and return to the physical world. Meanwhile, in the waking world, Bael knelt anxiously beside her sleeping form, desperately pleading with the attending doctors as 3 days had passed without her waking. Heart heavy with dread, he gripped her hand tightly, begging her to open her eyes and wake up. Surrounding servants watched in awe and panic, stunned to see a commander normally so composed on the battlefield so utterly frantic and losing control of his overflowing magic. Agonized over his helplessness, tormented by the painful reality that she had saved him, yet he remained completely powerless to awaken her. Gently cupping her face, he reflected on the struggle to rescue her from her home country, filled with bitter regret at her unmoving state. Remembered the radiant smile she had shared with him before, a precious memory contrasting sharply with the silent nightmare before him. Clasping her delicate fingers against his forehead, he whispered a desperate prayer, having desired nothing more in the world than to make her happy. Desperately held on to her limp hand, crying out into the void, begging her to return to his side. Across the boundary of realms, Adiya activated the spell of reunion, channeling bright divine light to bridge the distance between them. Suddenly, a sudden sound echoed through the quiet bedchamber, startling the young prince as he sat slumped in despair beside her bed. Reaching the divide, she reached out across the light and called out his name with all her heart. Eyes fluttered open as magic sparkled around the bed, softly reassuring him that she had finally returned. Overwhelmed with relief, he gazed down at her with tear-filled eyes, his heart overflowing at her safe return. Pulling her into a tight, desperate embrace, he wept as he explained she had been asleep for 3 full days, while she gently apologized for causing him such deep anxiety. Leaning his forehead against hers, he murmured softly that as long as she was safe, nothing else in the world mattered. He looked up into his tender gaze, exchanging a quiet moment of profound affection and warmth. Turning toward Morpheus, who sat nearby, she expressed her gratitude to the spirit for guiding her, though Morpheus modestly insisted her safe return was all thanks to her own courage. The spirit paused, sensing something remarkable emanating from her presence, realized that both her divine powers and Bael's lost magic had been restored together, prompting her to recount her encounter with the kind founding saint. Presenting the small vessel, she revealed it contained a fragment of his stolen childhood magic, explaining that drinking it would fully restore his original power. Advisor urged caution and begged to examine the object first, recalling how overwhelmingly strong the demon back then had been when stealing the prince's magic. Advisor stood firm in his duty to inspect the fragment, yet Morpheus reminded him that both he and Adiya had been judged worthy by the founding saint herself. Suddenly winced, clutching his head in agony as a sudden shock coursed through his body. Both his companion and his loyal advisor rushed to his side in alarm, fear written across their faces. Yet as the dark aura welled within him, the persistent headache that had plagued him for so long began to recede, replaced by a surge of overwhelming energy. Surrounded by a radiant dark aura, he felt his original magic power fully restored to its former glory. Watching the incredible display, the advisor marveled at the tremendous force that had once been stolen from the royal family, a power now reclaimed thanks to the young woman who had earned the trust of the founding saint. Overcome with emotion, the advisor dropped to one knee before her, offering his deepest gratitude for performing such a miracle. He graciously accepted his thanks, assuring him that she would serve with all her heart and soul from this day forth. Sometime later in the Imperial Library, the advisor introduced Madame Sart, a distinguished tutor who had previously educated the crown princess of the Arguru Empire to oversee her studies. Madame Sart initially held reservations, doubting whether a count's daughter elevated to princess could match the prince, but she greeted her with formal courtesy. Introducing herself warmly as a native of the Maya Holy Kingdom, the young woman demonstrated her preparation by addressing the tutor correctly, having already researched her background. She candidly admitted her lack of knowledge regarding imperial history, explaining that the prince himself had personally begun instructing her. Madame Sart quietly observed the two standing together, assessing their dynamic and rapport. Pressed by the young woman's humble attitude and determination to make up for her shortcomings, the tutor recognized the genuine bond she shared with the prince. Moving forward with the lesson, the instructor examined their study materials, noting with satisfaction how seamlessly the two complemented each other's knowledge. Meanwhile, behind closed fans, high-ranking noblewomen watched the unfolding developments from afar, quietly questioning whether opposing factions would truly accept this outcome without. As Lady Adiya prepares for an exclusive gathering, her loyal aides express deep concern regarding whether she will be fine attending alone. Given that Lady Narcisse specifically extended a formal request for a meeting disguised as a tea party, they feel powerless to intervene or join her. Meanwhile, Prince Bael quietly gazes from the palace windows, harboring his own quiet worries. He silently hopes she will manage to navigate the delicate diplomatic atmosphere without incident. Upon arriving at the reception room of the detached palace, she is warmly welcomed by Lady Narcisse. The host expresses sincere delight at the visit, while Lady Zart also greets them cordially, noting how pleasantly the two seem to get along. Seated at the elegant tea table, she admires the enchanting fragrance wafting from the teapot. Her host graciously explains that the exquisite blend was harvested directly from her family's personal domain. Generously offering a special portion, the noblewoman requests that she take some back for Prince Bael as well. Receiving the gift, she quietly contemplates the deep affection Lady Narcisse must harbor to go through such trouble for Bael. She gently sips her tea. She considers the effort required to procure such a rare treat. Observing Lady Narcisse's polished laughter, she realizes just how important Prince Bael remains to their refined host. Continuing the conversation, Lady Zart reveals that Narcisse and Prince Bael have known each other since childhood. Dazzled by Narcisse's poise and elegance, she recalls being told they were merely acquaintances. Yet Narcisse proudly presents herself as Bael's long-standing childhood friend. Confused by the conflicting statements, she wonders why Zell had previously described their bond so casually. Before she can process her lingering doubts, her host suddenly addresses her directly. The warm and radiant smile, the noblewoman praises her efforts, mentioning she heard reports of how exceptionally well she is performing as a candidate for crown princess. Blushing at the unexpected compliments, she listens as Lady Zart adds that the once cold atmosphere of the detached palace has noticeably softened since her arrival, even reassuring her that the emperor himself was informed of her immaculate treatment. High praise stirs a vivid memory within her mind, recalling the prince drawing near and whispering tenderly that her safety was all that truly mattered to him. Observing her visible bashfulness, Lady Narcisse claps her hands in delight, noting how deeply Prince Bael appears to cherish her and pleasantly admitting her own prior misapprehensions. Feeling a wave of relief, she chastises herself for ever suspecting Lady Narcisse's motives when she has proven so kind and welcoming. Suddenly, an attendant steps forward to whisper an urgent message to Lady Zart. Apologizing gracefully, Lady Zart excuses herself to attend to private matters. As the older lady steps away, she realizes with a sudden flutter of anxiety that she is now entirely alone with Lady Narcisse, though she genuinely hopes they can form a real friendship. The mediator gone, a quiet silence settles over the table as Lady Narcisse gazes across at her, marking a subtle shift in the tone of their meeting. She began to confess that when she first heard Prince Bader was bringing a candidate for crown princess, she felt compelled to speak. Sitting quietly across the table, she revealed the startling truth. She herself had also been a candidate for crown princess. Sudden revelation left Adiya wide-eyed with shock, catching her completely off guard. However, Narcisse quickly clapped her hands together with a sweet smile, expressing how glad she was that Adiya was such a wonderful person. Rising gracefully from her seat, Narcisse explained that she wanted to share this beforehand, so Adiya wouldn't be troubled by strange rumors. Reaching out gentle hands to offer comfort, Narcisse urged her not to worry about the past. Holding Adiya's hands warmth, Narcisse reassured her that they were never formally engaged and that she was merely one of several candidates. He expressed relief seeing the two of them together, glad that Prince Badr found someone he could cherish. A stark contrast to Adiya's memory of Badr holding her tightly and declaring how much he needed her. Leaning in closer, Narcisse asked Adiya to keep this conversation a secret to avoid unnecessary public fuss, to which Adiya quietly agreed. The reassuring smile, Narcisse offered to answer anything Adiya wished to know about Prince Badr, presenting herself as a supportive ally. Adiya noted Badr's usual quiet nature regarding his past, while Narcisse reiterated her willingness to help navigate high society and complicated ties. Clasping her own hands tightly, Adiya wrestled with an unsettling realization. Despite everything, she still knew so little about Badr. Reflecting on their journey, she recalled meeting him in dreams years ago, yet recognizing that they had only recently begun talking in earnest, making her feel as though Narcisse knew him far better than she did. She lowered her gaze as uncertainty clouded her mind, even though Badr had previously told her not to worry about anything. She vividly remembered Badr, holding her hands warmly, promising to protect her and assuring her not to pay mind to Narcisse. She silently observed the girl, considering how fragile her confidence truly was and how easily she was shaken. Reflecting on her own lifelong efforts to join the royal family, the noblewoman reminded Adiya that her presence was merely a result of Prince Badr's favor, wondering if she could endure the trials ahead. Although the noblewoman offered a light apology for bringing up delicate matters, the maiden insisted that hearing the truth directly was for the best. Noticing the tension lingering in the air, Lady Narcisse remarked that the two of them still had much to discuss. Acknowledging that the prince was far too busy to be bothered, Narcisse suddenly brightened with a new proposal. Later that day, the young woman informed Prince Badr and his attendant that she had been invited to attend Lady Narcisse's literary salon. Small spirit companion expressed excitement to join, thrilled to accompany her on her very first salon invitation. Alzel warned that attending a salon hosted by Narcisse could send the wrong message. The prince quietly assented, trusting that the spirit's presence would offer sufficient protection. Upon entering the Grand Dabalant estate, she marveled at the shared passion of the attendees, while Morpheus immediately sensed an unsettling atmosphere lurking behind the pleasant facades. Lady Narcisse reached out to welcome the divine spirit. Morpheus abruptly turned away in disdain. Maintaining her composed smile despite the rebuff, Narcisse gently excused the spirit's shyness, hoping he would gradually grow accustomed to her presence. Observing the creature's cold distance, she recognized that the spirit remained deeply suspicious of her intentions. Turning her attention to the gathering, the hostess called out to command the room's full attention. She formally presented the saint to the crowd, outwardly welcoming her while privately contemplating a mischievous surprise for Prince Badr. Relieved by the warm reception, the maiden offered a bright, genuine smile to the gathering. She listened quietly as Lady Narcisse gestured toward a curated selection of poetry collections and elegant stationery, suggesting that a chosen verse would be the perfect way to convey her true feelings. The noblewoman noted with a subtle smile that writing poetry was a classic approach to a love letter. A vibrant blush spread across her face. Mind drifted to Prince Badr, his gentle presence filling her thoughts as she contemplated expressing her devotion. Turning her focus to the task, she observed as Lady Narcisse offered various inks, offering a light blue shade that the prince had always favored. Overwhelmed by such thoughtful assistance, she offered a radiant smile and expressed her heartfelt thanks. Even the small spirit beside her marveled silently at how touchingly pure and earnest she remained. Meanwhile, Lady Narcisse stood back, observing the young woman with a complex, calculating gaze. Seated at the table, she carefully picked up the quill and prepared to put her feelings onto paper under Morpheus's watchful eyes. Noblewoman silently recognized that this genuine, unpretentious quality was precisely what attracted Prince Badr. He contemplated a heart so straightforward that it never entertained suspicion toward others. It struck Lady Narcisse how instantly she had been trusted, despite having openly identified herself as a rival candidate for crown princess. Suddenly, a wave of dizziness washed over her, causing her hand to slip and ruin the sheet with an unexpected ink blot. Noticing her distress, Lady Narcisse stepped forward immediately, gently advising her to set aside the spoiled page and begin anew on a fresh sheet. Accepting the replacement, she voiced her sincere gratitude once more, hoping the letter would convey everything in her heart. With an enthusiastic smile, she joined Lady Narcisse in sharing warm wishes for the outcome of her devotion. She let out a quiet chuckle, musing aloud that they were truly polar opposites. The letter resting inside the open box revealed a long, dark streak across its unfinished bottom. The literary salon within the Narcisse estate, a box containing manuscript pages was presented. Someone examined the papers, another observed the intriguing text in silence. Reading through the passionate notes, the examiner noted how intense the writing appeared, suddenly realizing something striking about the handwriting. Clenching the paper tightly, anger flared at the memory of that woman. Later at the royal palace, Bael walked alongside Adiya, asking her how she had found Narcisse's salon. She explained that Narcisse had mentioned ancient books stored in the royal library rather than the detached palace. Looking at him with a warm smile, she expressed how enjoyable and educational the gathering had been. She added that everyone had welcomed her warmly during her visit. Narcisse had taken her hands, reassuring her how glad she was that Lord Bael had finally found someone he could cherish so deeply. Calling those gentle words, Adiya praised Lady Narcisse as exceptionally intelligent and kind. With a bright expression, she shared her desire to make many friends in the Algul Empire, knowing she would be living there for the rest of her life. Bael agreed softly, acknowledging that she needed companionable bonds in their country and that he should not monopolize her completely. He closed his eyes momentarily, taking a quiet breath. Reaching out to gently stroke her hair, he resolved to hold back his possessiveness for her sake, leaving Morpheus looking on with curiosity. Their path was interrupted as Lady Narcisse approached them gracefully, greeting them both. Starting from the right, Narcisse offered formal greetings to the Star of the Empire, though Bael brushed off the formalities. Narcisse noted how close they appeared and asked if they were heading to the royal library she recommended, to which Adiya delightfully confirmed. She stood poised alongside the prince as quiet whispers began to ripple among the nobility gathered in the grand corridor. Watching the elegant noblewoman side by side with Bael, Adiya could not help but feel that someone of such distinction suited him far better than she ever could. Sharp sting of self-doubt tightened in her chest, forcing her gaze downward. She recalled their private conversation over tea, where Lady Narcisse had quietly revealed her former status as a candidate for crown princess, subtly reminding Adiya of her own lowly standing. Those harsh words echoed relentlessly in her mind, insisting that someone like her could never be acknowledged by the imperial court. Turning to the present tension, Bael sensed the rising commotion among the crowd and demanded to know what scheme was unfolding before them. Before anyone could reply, Lord Shihab stepped forward dramatically, shouting Prince Bael's name to command the entire hall's attention. Boldly declared that Adiya was a dangerous figure who posed a threat to the realm, catching both Bael and Adiya off guard. Pointing an accusing finger, the nobleman dramatically branded her a clandestine spy sent from the Holy Kingdom of Maya. Adiya gasped in utter disbelief. Morpheus fiercely protested, rejecting the absurd accusation outright. Bael sternly warned against making treasonous claims without proof, prompting Shihab to triumphantly produce a handwritten letter on stationery that Lady Narcisse immediately recognized as Adiya's. Delicate script revealed affectionate lines, speaking fondly of gentle eyes and warm affection. Continued reading the romantic letter aloud, quoting poetic sentiments about unforgotten auroras, as Adiya stood mortified and Lady Narcisse feigned astonishment. Surrounding onlookers immediately took up the whisper campaign, declaring the scandal atrocious and whispering that she surely harbored a secret lover elsewhere. Holding high the handwritten letter as absolute proof of her infidelity, Shihab declared to the court that she had abandoned a lover in her homeland merely to seduce the prince. Could only watch in stunned silence as Prince Bael gently confronted Adiya, asking if the love letter had been addressed to him all along. Covering her blushing face in deep embarrassment, she confessed that it was merely a discarded draft she had lacked the courage to show anyone. Surrounding court onlookers stood completely speechless as the dramatic turn of events unfolded before them. Smiling softly at her reaction, the prince found her endearing worry adorable, while she looked up with flushed cheeks and admitted she had simply wished to give him something beautiful. He playfully asked if she would write a new one for him. She eagerly agreed, prompting an outraged Shihab to interject that the prince was being foolishly deceived by a letter not meant for him. Fixing the nobleman with a piercing cold glare, Bael firmly questioned if he was truly daring to claim the letter was meant for someone else. A wave of intense pressure rippled through the hall, sending shockwaves through the gathered nobles as the mood instantly shifted. Sweating nervously, Shihab pointed out the specific mention of an aurora in the letter's text, attempting to dismantle her claim. Noted to the entire room that no record existed of an aurora ever occurring since the two of them had first met. Pressing his advantage, he demanded to know if such a discrepancy did not clearly prove the letter was intended for a different lover. As Lady Narcisse and other onlookers murmured their agreement about never witnessing an aurora, Bael calmly clarified that it referred to the celestial phenomenon they had shared when she rescued him from a terrifying nightmare. Vivid memory flashed back. A perilous moment within the dream realm where she had desperately urged him to awaken so they could survive. Overwhelmed with emotion, Adiya asked if he truly remembered, and Bael assured her warmly that he could never forget their shared moments, leaving Shihab utterly dumbfounded. Gazed down at her with an extraordinary tenderness, his eyes filled with profound affection. Turning back to Shihab, Bael sternly demanded to know how he came into possession of the private draft and why he staged such a public farce, forcing the humiliated nobleman to stammer that a maid from his salon had retrieved it from a discarded draft box. Acknowledging that anyone could make a mistake, Bael offered a formal deep apology for the spectacle, which Adiya graciously accepted to conclude the ordeal. Concluded firmly that the situation could not be allowed to stand as an acceptable standard. To settle the matter, the noblewoman offered a severe gesture of apology, declaring that her servant's hand should be severed. Maid knelt silently before her unyielding mistress, awaiting the harsh punishment. Shocked by the extreme judgment, Adiya gasped, protesting that the maid had served loyally for a long time. Servant expressed gratitude for her years of service, but acknowledged that her mistress's family honor was paramount, bowing her head in surrender as the noble prince agreed to let the matter conclude. Adiya looked on in desperate horror as the servant stretched her arms forward onto the floor, ready to receive the grim penalty. Going in her mind were harsh reminders of her status as a crown princess candidate and the expectation to act without weakness. Whispers rippled through the surrounding crowd, praising Lady Narcisse's noble pride while Shihab stood by, silent and shaken. Able to bear the violence, Adiya rushed forward and placed her hands over the servants, crying out for the punishment to stop. Breathing heavily, she offered her protection, assuring the kneeling woman that everything was all right. Lady Narcisse watched quietly as Adiya gently helped the weeping maid to her feet. Addressing the room, Narcisse turned to apologize directly to Adiya, while Shihab acknowledged his mistake and cautioned everyone against acting on unverified rumors. The confrontation diffused, Shihab bowed deeply in remorse to Lady Narcisse for the trouble caused. Watching Shihab finally swallow his pride, Adiya felt a quiet relief and warmth spread through her chest. Lady Narcisse then approached Adiya with a gracious smile, offering to deepen their bond and introduce her to her circle of friends. He generously promised to introduce the young saint to trustworthy noblewomen, so she would never be mistaken for a spy again, leaving Adiya clutching her bodice in utter disbelief at the sudden turn of events. Overcome with joy and relief, Adiya flushed brightly, enthusiastically accepting the noblewoman's gracious offer. As Adiya smiled softly at the prospect of new allies, Lady Narcisse quietly resolved to observe the young woman's actions for the reception room of Battle Palace. A sparkling box of exquisite jewels was presented to prepare for Lady Narcisse Aldebaran's upcoming gathering. The attendant announced the wide selection curated for her. Adiya marveled at the dazzling assortment alongside Prince Bael, who warmly encouraged her to pick whichever piece she desired. Observing the couple, the attendant noted that Adiya looked stunning in anything, making the selection process worthwhile, while Bael assured her that her choices already aligned perfectly with his personal preferences. Overwhelmed by the options, she let out a gentle sigh of indecision, prompting Morpheus to playfully ask what was troubling her when faced with such abundance. Her heart fluttered as her gaze was drawn toward a particularly striking pendant gleaming among the treasures. Before she could reach out, a sudden flinch stayed her hand, frozen in hesitation. Clenching her fist tightly, her eyes welled with tears as an overwhelming wave of emotion washed over her. Looking on, Morpheus voiced his concern as she quietly expressed that she had already received more than enough. Noticing her pause, Bael gently stepped forward, placing a stunning gem right at her collar and offering it with a warm smile, remarking that he believed it suited her perfectly. Guiding her gently toward the mirror, he pointed out her reflection so she could see the match for herself. Flushed with embarrassment, she gazed at her reflection in awe, marveling at how tailor-made the piece looked upon her. Bael gently explained that he had noticed her hesitation and chose this piece believing it was the best fit, while his quiet attentiveness left a deep impression on her. As she held the jewel close, painful memories resurfaced, echoing cruel voices accusing her of being greedy for wanting anything nice. She recalled harsh words from her past, where Lord Shihab and Lady Laila dismissed her desires, claiming flashy things never suited her and taking what was meant for her instead. These lingering shadows left her uncertain, burdened by memories of being made to feel unworthy of anything crafted to suit her. He leaned into his gentle embrace as he held her close, assuring her that no one in this palace would ever mock her sense of beauty or question her worth. Whispering her name softly, she looked up as Bael gently cupped her cheek, reminding her that her tastes were refined and meaningful. Looking down into her eyes with unwavering affection, he reminded her of the choice she had made, bringing a bright, genuine smile back to her face. With her heart at ease, she finally felt capable of expressing her true feelings, wondering aloud as she prepared an abundance of baked goods, whether it was too much for just the two of them. She explained that she was making simple cookies to bring to Lady Narcisse Aldebaran's upcoming gathering. He recalled the initial moment when Lady Narcisse had inquired with delight about what treats were being prepared. In that memory, even when she humbly protested that her baking was not grand enough for high society, Lady Narcisse insisted on tasting them. Lady Narcisse praised her modesty and warmly invited her to bring the homemade treats to a casual gathering, though she had felt a flicker of hesitation. Listening attentively to her story, Bael absorbed every word with quiet intensity. A shadow of suspicion crossed his mind as he considered the social implications of handmade sweets being served at an imperial noble gathering hosted by someone like Narcisse. Determined to protect her, he realized this event could be the perfect opportunity to uncover Lady Narcisse's true motives. Without hesitation, he offered his help in the kitchen, rolling up his sleeves while Morpheus bounded in eagerly. Overjoyed by his unexpected offer, her eyes sparkled as Bael set down the baking supplies on the counter. Working side by side under the guidance of the imperial kitchen staff, they carefully mixed and shaped the dough together. The tray of golden cookies was finally pulled fresh from the oven. Morpheus hovered impetuously to sample one, forcing her to gently tell the spirit to wait until they cooled. He clasped her hands together in silent prayer, pouring all her earnest hopes into the treats they were preparing. Warm, magical light radiated around her as she wished pure happiness upon anyone who would partake of the baked goods. Freshly baked square cookies lined the tray, their golden tops glowing softly while the prince looked on in quiet admiration. Spirit Morpheus squealed with delight after tasting one, declaring how delicious it was and how it warmed his very heart. Watched as she softly gasped, touched by the creature's enthusiastic response to her baking. Making a cookie for himself, the prince took a bite and looked down at her with a gentle, appreciative smile. Confirmed that they were indeed wonderful, suggesting that working together made them taste even better than usual. Later at the residence of House Aldebaran, she arrived with a carefully wrapped basket of treats, hoping Lady Narcisse would be pleased. Reassuring herself that it was merely an informal tea gathering, she stepped inside as guided by the attendant. Upon entering the grand room, she was greeted by an unexpected silence, finding several noblewomen seated around a pristine salon. Lady Narcisse welcomed her warmly, announcing her arrival to the gathered guests who turned their gaze toward the doorway. Whispers immediately spread among the high society ladies, recognizing her as the famed candidate to become Prince Bael's fiancé. Lady Narcisse then addressed the room, revealing that because of her presence, a very special guest had been invited. Unsettled by the announcement, she wondered why a casual gathering had suddenly taken such a grand and mysterious turn. Doors parted dramatically to reveal Princess Sahar Ras Algul, who strode forward in magnificent regal attire. She stood tall, her serene gaze settling calmly upon Adiya, who met her eyes with a nervous reverence. The room fell silent as the noble onlookers watched the sudden encounter unfold between the dark-robed princess and the saint. Slight intriguing smile crossed her lips, concealing whatever thoughts lay beneath her composed demeanor. Breaking the silence, Princess Sahar addressed her directly as the rumored Lady Adiya. Adiya politely offered her greetings, though the word rumored echoed uneasily in her mind. Gaze soon shifted downward to the covered basket resting in Adiya's hands, inquisitively asking what was hidden inside. Without hesitation, the cloth covering was pulled back to reveal the contents. Inside rested a neat arrangement of fresh-baked, golden cookies, prompting silent surprise as to whether they were handmade. Adiya struggled to explain herself, but the surrounding noblewomen immediately began whispering, calling it improper and rude to present common handmade goods to royalty. Hearing their harsh words, Adiya's face flushed bright red with embarrassment. She internally panicked, desperately wishing she had known Her Highness would be present before bringing her rustic baking, while Princess Sahar continued to observe her with a composed, knowing expression. Narcisse cordially welcomes Princess Sahar to the gathering, expressing her immense joy at the royal's presence. The princess responds with practiced grace, assuring her host that she would never dream of declining such a prestigious invitation, while the young saint stands quietly in the background holding a woven basket. Turning her attention toward the young saint, the noblewoman maintains a polite yet distant smile, casting a subtle air of condescension over the simple offering brought to the venue. She delicately suggests that simple homemade treats are hardly appropriate fare for high royalty like Princess Sahar. Without breaking her composed facade, she smoothly requests that the young saint take her baked goods back home instead of serving them. Outraged by the blatant disrespect, the small spirit creature beside the saint snaps furiously, pointing out that the noblewoman herself had originally requested those very baked goods. Young saint immediately hushes her companion and apologizes for the outburst, while the noblewoman smoothly excuses the dismissive treatment as merely an everyday reality of high society. Internally, the noblewoman calculates the political maneuvering at play, wondering how the situation will unfold and whether the unexpected turn of events was intentional. Clutched tightly in her hands, the basket feels heavy as the young saint recalls the noblewoman's initial assurances, trying to make sense of the sudden rejection. Staring down at her humble offering, she quietly wonders why she is being subjected to such cold exclusion. Memories of past warmth surface, recalling how cherished and delicious shared meals felt when made together with care. Shaking off her sorrow, she graciously accedes to the noblewoman's request, offering her sincere thanks for pointing out the breach of etiquette before agreeing to take the treats away. Noblewoman stands stunned by the saint's serene acceptance, baffled as to why the girl shows no trace of anger or resentment. Clasping her arms in frustration, she comes to the uncomfortable realization that the saint possesses a selfless nature completely opposite to her own calculating heart. Suddenly, a slender hand reaches into the basket, and Princess Sahar casually pops one of the homemade treats into her mouth right before the astonished eyes of the young saint. Gasping in collective shock, the onlookers watch helplessly as the royal guest thoughtfully samples the pastry, completely shattering the noblewoman's exclusionary tactics. She's sampling the pastry, suddenly asking if a spell had been cast upon it. Outraged, Narcisse shouts at Adiya, demanding to know what she meant by that accusation. He dramatically accuses Adiya of harming them, leaving the young woman stunned. Painful memories surface of past betrayals where former friends turned against her despite her sacred prayers. Narcisse warns sternly that no harm must come to the princess. Echoes of past scoldings ring in Adiya's mind, recalling how she was falsely accused of bullying her sister. Images of Laila crying and her mother taking her sister's side flood back, reinforcing her lifelong isolation. Bitter truth weighs on her heart. No one will ever believe her. Suddenly, an angry voice cuts through the tension, dismissing the accusation as ridiculous. Orpheus steps in fiercely, shouting that Adiya would never do such a thing. Small spirit bravely positioned itself in front of her to defend her honor. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Adiya looks softly at her tiny defender. Dismissing Narcisse's lack of proof, Princess Sahar calmly asks Adiya for another treat. Sahar smiles softly and declares it delicious, shocking Narcisse completely. Silenced and humiliated, Narcisse stands stunned as her scheme completely unravels. She could only listen in quiet disbelief as Princess Sahar revealed that Bael had personally told her about the confections, confirming that the two of them had prepared the sweets together. Sahar chuckled lightly, finding it quite amusing that the prince had engaged in such an endeavor, while he stood beside her in silent annoyance. Bitter realization struck Narcisse like a physical blow, consumed by the agonizing thought that Adiya and Bael had shared such an intimate task alone. Dark, suffocating aura surged around her as she clenched her jaw in suppressed fury. Meanwhile, a warm and peaceful atmosphere radiated across the table where the guests sat gathered. Noblewomen praised the soothing influence of the saint's blessing, marveling at how comforting the handcrafted sweets truly were. Sahar turned to Adiya and mentioned that Bael had praised her ability to interpret dreams, asking if she would be willing to read one for them. Narcisse interjected, confessing that she had been suffering from terrible nightmares and severe sleep deprivation, prompting a surprised reaction from Adiya. She recounted her haunting vision, describing a star crashing directly into the full moon as white flames consumed it, leaving only ruin in its wake. All that remained in the end was absolute pitch-black darkness. Narcisse pressed for an answer, leaving Adiya momentarily speechless as she searched for the proper response. Noting that Bael's name signified the full moon, the omen seemed alarmingly clear, and those present urged Adiya to reveal what it meant. Determined to confront the vision directly, Adiya approached Narcisse and asked for permission to touch her shoulder. Expressing her genuine concern over the woman's disturbing dreams, Adiya gently rested her hand upon her to begin the spiritual reading. Crossing the threshold into the subconscious, she descended into the vast, dark realm of Narcisse's nightmare to seek out the source of the full moon. She stepped into the vast, cloud-filled expanse of the dreamscape alongside her spirit companion, only to find the realm completely devoid of dark visions or nightmare remnants. Orpheus promptly revealed the truth to her. Narcisse had not been suffering from nightmares at all, exposing the noblewoman's claims as complete fabrication. seconds. Realizing she had been deceived, the young saint recalled Narcisse's subtle insults and duplicity, hurt by the realization that their supposed friendship was merely a calculated lie. Snapping back to reality, her eyes slowly opened, their usual softness replaced by a sharp, calculating gaze. With a composed demeanor, she turned directly to Narcisse and inquired precisely when this supposed nightmare had taken place. She pointedly observed that no lingering afterimages or spiritual traces of any dream remained on the woman, subtly backing Narcisse into a corner. Flustered and defensive, Narcisse challenged whether she was being accused of lying, but Adiya smoothly countered that an old dream would leave no lasting influence anyway. Forced to back down, the noblewoman claimed it had simply been a profound past dream that worried her, allowing the saint to graciously conclude that no threat existed. Offering a brilliant, innocent smile, she expressed her delight at being able to clear up the misunderstanding and provide assistance. Princess Sahar applauded her exceptional skill and offered her gratitude, while Narcisse looked on in silent frustration. Beneath her quiet exterior, Narcisse seethed with violent rage, nursing deep resentment over the public humiliation she had just. Intense, resentful voice echoes from the darkness, accusing her of suffering deep humiliation. Back in the grand hall, gentle applause breaks the silence as the gathered aristocrats observe the saint. Lady Narcisse acknowledges the magnificent display of magic, yet resting her cheek on her hand, she smooth pivots to a lingering doubt, asking why someone with such formidable ability could not alter her own fate. Subtle, knowing smile touches the noblewoman's lips as she watches the young woman carefully. She presses the point further, asking outright why she was powerless to prevent her own tragic misfortunes. Sharp question cuts deep, summoning painful memories of standing alone and discarded. Her heart pounds frantically as her eyes widen in sudden resurfacing distress. Echoes of her parents' harsh rejection resurface, remembering how they had deemed her very birth a dreadful mistake. Bitter memory of her former fiancé embracing her sister follows, callously declaring the annulment of their engagement in favor of Laila. Cruel taunts of being labeled a useless saintess rush back, threatening to crush her spirits once more. Tears well up in her eyes as she clutches her chest, desperately trying to silence the tormenting voices in her mind. Suddenly, Morpheus interjects vigorously, shouting that her true strength had been drained by an incubus, and that once she reclaimed her power, she had courageously saved him from that malevolent spirit. Spirit recalls the pivotal moment when she reached out into the realm of dreams and commanded him to awaken. Keeping boldly in front of the noblewoman, the small spirit proudly proclaims to everyone present how extraordinary Adiya truly is. As Lady Narcisse looks on silently, Morpheus glares back with unwavering resolve, vowing that this time he will protect Adiya from any harm. The tapir spirit's defense faded, she clutched her hands against her heart, her thoughts drifting back to the prince's unwavering assertion that he desired no one else but her. Stepping closer, the noblewoman leaned in to whisper a stern reminder that as an imperial princess candidate, she had to maintain composure to avoid disdain, strengthening her resolve to grow stronger for the prince. Turning to the surrounding court, she clearly outlined her past ordeal, explaining how an incubus had manipulated those around her and stolen her power before the prince helped her reclaim it and gain adoption as a princess. Looking directly at her critic, she pointedly questioned if her official recognition by the nation did not prove she was entirely blameless in her past misfortune. Observing the young woman from behind, the noblewoman could not help but reflect on how far someone who originally relied entirely on the prince's protection had come in so short a time. She had previously dismissed her as weak-willed. The noblewoman begrudgingly acknowledged that her present dignity was undeniably impressive. Intervening in the exchange, the royal princess pointed out to the noblewoman that noble engagements involve complex circumstances and that blaming the maiden prematurely was unjust. Descending the steps, the princess offered a sincere apology on behalf of her brother's past selfishness, prompting the noblewoman to curtsy respectfully. Accepting the royal apology gracefully, the noblewoman bowed deeply, assuring the princess that she was fully prepared to make any sacrifice for the sake of the imperial family. Expressing her gratitude, the princess offered words of partnership, while the noblewoman affirmed her commitment to working alongside the imperial court moving forward. Once alone, however, the noblewoman trembled with suppressed rage, seething over the humiliating setback and dreading the consequences should her father learn of the encounter. Tense confrontation in the hall faded into the quiet halls of the imperial palace where larger political machinations were taking shape. Inside the emperor's office, reports circulated regarding a formal petition submitted by the Marquis of Dabaran, claiming that the young maiden was utterly unfit to become the crown princess. Viewing the political balance, an imperial advisor noted that given her nation's minor status, installing the noblewoman instead would align far better with national interests. The advisor discussed the strategic advantages in low tones. The prince listened quietly, well aware of the growing opposition gathering against his chosen partner, stood silently alongside the emperor as Marquis Dabaran pressed the issue, inquiring how such widespread political dissatisfaction among the nobility could possibly be suppressed. Shortly after, Prince Bael and Adiya were summoned directly into the grand audience chamber, where the emperor called a halt to their formal greetings and welcomed them both. Bael narrowed his eyes at Marquis Dabaran, suspecting that the manipulative nobleman had personally whispered scheming advice into the emperor's ear regarding Lady Narcisse. Memories surfaced of the time Bael had successfully subjugated a formidable monster, after which the emperor granted him a reward and demanded he name his price. The emperor had imposed a strict deadline, declaring that if Bael failed to choose a suitable partner by his 18th birthday, a bride would be chosen for him. Clenching his fist tightly in frustration, Bael pondered whether his father truly intended to continue meddling in his marital engagement. Breaking the silence, Marquis Dabaran addressed the young couple directly, announcing that he had a matter of importance to discuss with them. To their immense surprise, the Marquis declared that he intended to grant them a vacation. Both Bael and Adiya voiced their confusion, prompting Marquis de Baran to clarify that he wished for them to conduct an inspection at the Great Western Temple. The Marquis noted that ever since Adiya arrived in the Empire, her grueling imperial training had prevented her from having any leisure time to explore the realm. Adiya looked aside, softly acknowledging that his assessment of her schedule was indeed accurate. Encouraging her to view the inspection as an enjoyable holiday accompanied by Prince Bael, Marquis Dabaran watched as Adiya's face flushed with delight. Adiya expressed her heartfelt gratitude. Bael remained deeply suspicious, observing her quiet happiness with guarded eyes. Deep in thought, Bael reasoned that Marquis Dabaran would never grant such a privilege without ulterior motives, sensing a hidden trap behind the proposed journey. Meanwhile, the elder advisor viewed the assignment as an implicit trial, warning that Adiya would need to prove her utility over Lady Narcissus during this journey. She stood quietly as the grand ultimatum was issued, instructed to prove her own worth so that the high court nobility would finally acknowledge her presence alongside the prince. Humbled by the weighty consideration, she bowed deeply in gratitude, while Prince Bael nodded beside her, pledging his full support for the sake of the crown. The Marquis offered a calm, knowing smile. Bael returned the gaze with dark, guarded eyes, well aware of the hidden intentions lurking behind the court's words. Upon returning to the quiet sanctuary of the imperial villa, the prince's sole focus hardened into an unyielding resolve to protect her from whatever trial awaited. Outside the grand estate, servants worked briskly to load trunks into the traveling carriage, finalizing preparations for their long journey ahead. Overjoyed by the prospect of a journey together, she could barely contain her excitement, while Bael watched her beaming face, realizing that seeing her happy made every risk worthwhile. Yet beneath his quiet composure, Bael tightly clenched his hand, remaining vigilant of the scheming nobles who watched their every move. Looking down at her gentle smile, his heart settled on a single promise. No matter what dangers lay ahead, he would shield her from harm. They approached the waiting carriage. Lady Zart stepped forward into the courtyard to offer her personal farewells. Acknowledging that this was her very first journey within the Empire, the elder woman offered a reassuring local proverb, reminding her that so long as the moon was at her side, she had no need to fear the stars. Holding her hands in a warm, motherly clasp, Lady Zart expressed complete confidence that the two of them possessed the strength to overcome any obstacle. Soft blush washed across her cheeks as the unexpected warmth of those words reached the deepest corners of her heart. Bitter memories resurfaced of her past home, where celebrations were reserved only for her sister and her own presence was met with nothing but cold indifference. Realizing that not even her own mother had ever spoken to her with such genuine affection, tears of gratitude filled her eyes as she offered a heartfelt thanks. Lady Zart remained standing upon the stone steps, watching quietly as the carriage pulled away to begin their crucial journey. She carried the heartfelt plea to return safely in her thoughts as the vast open sky stretched above them. Across the quiet expanse of water, the villa and the sacred temple were clearly visible along the shore. The pond surrounding the temple held countless memories of childhood days spent playing alongside her sister. As they drifted further along the lake, she admired the delicate paper in her hands, curiously inquiring about the nature of the traditions practiced here. Explained that participants would write their deepest wishes on specialized paper that dissolved upon touching the water, flowing directly toward the temple pond to grant their desires. When she asked if he had participated, he quietly confirmed he had. He added that local legends spoke of a lake spirit residing in these waters, which was once so pristine one could gaze straight to the bottom. Gazing down into the shadowy depths alongside Morpheus, she pondered why such once clear waters had turned so dark and murky over time. Quiet solemnity settled over her as she realized this place was bound to his most cherished memories. Without warning, a sudden surge of radiant magic erupted beneath her, forcing a sharp cry from her lips as brilliant light enveloped the boat. Twisting around in alarm, he braced himself against the side of the vessel as shimmering particles cascaded over the surface of the lake. Watching the dark waters rapidly clarify before his eyes, he marveled at the sudden purification, wondering if she had unconsciously unleashed her innate power. Glinting orbs of spiritual light emerged around them, carrying visions of the saintess. He observed the phenomenon softly, remarking that the lake itself seemed to welcome her presence. Before either could react, a massive sphere of water sealed around her, lifting her body effortlessly off the wooden deck into midair. Panic seized her as she found herself trapped within the orb, fruitlessly pressing against the barrier while calling out to her companions. Desperate to reach her, he stretched his arm forward, shouting her name as she reached back through the translucent wall. Fingers collided uselessly against the surface of the barrier, unable to break the magical seal isolating her. Violent waves smashed against the vessel, rocking it wildly as Morpheus shouted a desperate warning into the tempest. Chaotic water churned around them in a sudden frenzy, threatening to capsize the boat entirely. Urging the prince to act quickly, the small taper spirit pleaded for him to rescue Adiya without delay. Confident in his resolve, Bael assured the creature that he was more than capable of handling the danger. Leaving the spirit behind, he removed his heavy outer coat and prepared to leap straight into the churning waters. Plunging beneath the violent surface, he kicked fiercely through the white foam to reach the submerged sphere. With absolute determination in his heart, he vowed that he would save her no matter the cost. Meanwhile, deep within the luminescent orb, Adiya floated weightlessly as churning bubbles surrounded her soft form. Opening her eyes, she was surprised to feel no pain, Whispering voices inside glowing bubbles suddenly called out to her, begging the saintess for aid. Spirit bubbles pleaded urgently, revealing that Lord Nozzle was currently suffering from a mysterious sleeping sickness. Recognizing that this domain held Bael's sacred memories, she agreed to help despite the danger. Drawn further into the abyss, she crossed into Lord Nazel's dream world, sensing a heavy atmosphere laden with profound sorrow. She stood in the dark expanse. Countess papers inscribed with human wishes fluttered down from above. Feeling to inspect one paper demanding wealth, she realized that this was how the people's desires were delivered directly to him. Suddenly, harsh, resentful voices echoed around her, accusing him of failing to grant their greedy demands until she begged for the malicious whispers to cease. Looking ahead, she spotted a figure collapsed on the floor, overwhelmed by the crushing burden of hearing endless selfish desires. Clutching his head in agony, Lord Nazel suffered under the overwhelming weight of the human minds connected to him. Above the torment, a sinister voice boomed through the darkness, warning him never to place his trust in mortals. In the dark realm of the dream, a shadowy entity whispers venomous thoughts, insisting that people merely exploit others without a shred of gratitude. Adiya stands nearby, watching in deep concern as the dark influence tightens its hold. Refusing to let the darkness prevail, Adiya cries out, pleading with Lord Nazel not to listen to the deceitful words of the dream demon. Malicious Shadow retorts coldly, asking if its harsh words are not simply the absolute truth of the world. The entity continues its psychological assault, reminding him how easily people betray one another, even claiming that parents make a sacrifice of their own children. Painful memories resurface of cruel rejections and harsh betrayals, but Adiya firmly stands her ground, shouting that Bael is entirely different from those who cause harm. Drawing upon the strength within her heart, she channels her purifying power and commands the dream demon to vanish at once. Overwhelmed by the radiant burst of pure energy, the shadow recoils in agony and dissipates into nothingness. Feeling the power within her growing stronger, she places a gentle hand over her heart, reflecting on how Bael's unwavering trust and warm words gave her the fortitude to stand tall. The lingering darkness banished, a gentle warmth radiates through the air, and she offers a compassionate, reassuring smile. He steps closer to Lord Nazel, gently inquiring about his well-being, prompting him to slowly look up and ask for her identity. The serene and welcoming smile, she introduces herself simply as Adiya. She softly explains that this world was a nightmare conjured by the dream demon, reassuring him that even if he awakens, everything will be all right because the lake has finally been purified. He gently encourages him to return, revealing that everyone is eagerly waiting for his awakening, while the surrounding spirit bubbles hum with hopeful calls. Overcome with quiet emotion, Lord Nazel realizes the depth of care surrounding him, moved to tears by the knowledge that people came to save him. Standing amid floating spheres of light in a restored and tranquil realm, he reaches out, his heart finally liberated from the suffocating burden of his solitude. Watches as shimmering curtains of light ripple across the awakening sky, signaling that the dark curse hanging over the realm has finally dissolved. Standing beside him in the quiet expanse, the saint softly speaks, informing him that his consciousness has begun to stir from the deep slumber. She offers a gentle, radiant smile, declaring that the moment has arrived for him to return to the real world. His voices echoing gratitude call out to her from across the restored landscape. He gazes at her in quiet awe, coming to the profound realization that she has single-handedly saved both his spirit and the sacred lake. Mesmerized by her presence amidst floating orb-like reflections, he marvels to himself at how remarkably beautiful she is, wondering if it is her mere presence that renders the entire realm so breathtaking. Addressing her directly by name, he marvels at her full awakening. When she modestly attempts to thank him and asks how she might return to her own realm, he steps closer, taking her hands into his own to express a gratitude far deeper than words. Gasping in utter surprise at his sudden gesture, she is left speechless as he looks directly into her eyes and proposes to welcome her as his bride. While he beams at her with tender affection, her mind reels in total shock, unable to comprehend the sudden turn of